Two, one. Okay, this is M.E. Thomas, and I'm here talking to Pretty Morbid again, who I kind of forgot about this. Uh, the things that we talked about, I was just thinking this the other day. You told the story about how you when you go drinking with your friends, right? And you can clarify or correct me about the details, but that you order like four shots like immediately. And like water, and then just drink water the rest of the night, and they're always like, it's so weird that you just kind of drink these shots, whereas everybody else is trying to kind of pretend like, oh, I'm not here to get drunk, but they are. Like,
Yeah,
they,
yeah,
they can't do it that way. That just shows too much kind of shows too much. What did you kind of say? It shows too much kind of like intent or something, like they need to have plausible deniability to themselves about their motivations. Like they don't want to feel like they're just there to get drunk because maybe it makes it seem like they have a problem with alcohol or something. But if they're just there with friends and they just happen to
yeah.
get drunk because they're there, and they're drinking and having fun, then that's okay. But what was the thing you kind of used the phrase for it? Do you remember?
Um, I'm not sure what phrase I used for it, but I do remember it is that thing of like, there's a lot of weird emotional and social like entanglements with alcohol and like what's permitted, how much can you drink, when can you drink, and I don't know. I do know like a lot of people have this like, oh, let's settle in. Let's just start with like a beer and like have a little chit chat. And then by the end of the night, everyone's just sloshed and it's a mess. But if you go in just being like, we're gonna be hammered, so give me four shots now and I'll cruise it out. Yeah, it tends to like be jarring to people.
Yeah, but the reason why you do it too, isn't it because like you're like, "Oh, well, I need to get home and kind of be sober enough to get home, okay, safely at the end of the night." Like it's totally like for a reason, right? You don't keep drinking. You drink the four shots and then you stop drinking, right? So and
Yeah.
don't you say that you like intentionally show up and not eat so it will hit
Yeah.
faster, harder?
Yeah. 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 So I show up on an empty stomach. I immediately have four shots of like the cheapest whiskey and then order like some food and drink water. But the thing
Uh-huh.
is, so over this past probably like 6 months to a year, I've done more of what everyone else does, and it has caused me much more consequences because
Really?
yeah, because since I don't do this like just get drunk immediately, hang out and sober up, I I mean like I've literally gotten a DUI over the past 6 months. I've just ended up in a lot of situations where I'm way more hammered and don't have control of the situation, or I spend way more money than I want to because I
Oh.
just like I kind of did what everyone else did. Like I just started with beers and then eventually someone's like, "Let's do shots." And then someone buys you a mixed drink, and then it just like gets out of hand where everyone's buying stuff and doing this and that. By the end of the night you don't know how many drinks you've had or how long it's been. um and then yeah, then I just kind of fucked myself over. So I do actually still prefer the robot mechanical intoxication method that I had before.
Yes, and as we're kind of talking, I remember at least the label that I used, I think, was like one thing leads to another, like how normal people, because I think maybe I even told the story about how like the first time that I made out with my life partner, Arya, uh introduced it by saying, "Let's talk logistics. Do you want to make out?" And I think most people would think that also sounds a little robot.
Yeah.
Weird, like, is that the logistics? Like, what is the okay. So, yeah, instead they want it to be like one thing led to another, but the problem with one thing led to another is you're kind of shielding yourself from your own intentions, motivations, actions, consequences, and you're definitely, uh, kind of like intentionally giving up your own agency, or like trying to make it look
Yeah.
as if that you are not the one deciding that it's just one thing led to another. And so that's like a really interesting, why would people do that is intentionally kind of disempower themselves. Seems kind of odd. But if you're interested in that, you can check out the previous Pretty Morbid ones. But
Well, I was gonna
what we're
actually
gonna
say, could I say something
okay,
about
yeah,
that
yeah.
first?
Absolutely.
I think there is like, well, I think most people are really, I don't know if they can really imagine how intention set experience is like for people who are, I'd say predominantly like psychopathically like predisposed. But I think part of it comes from a desire to seek like flow state, and people will disempower themselves because the responsibility that they feel to choose and to make good decisions like stresses them out immensely.
Mm.
So they will like I think most people, especially if they're emotionally connected and sensitive, they are like looking for a situation where they don't constantly have to like manage their emotions. Um, but I think being myself and other people who are more psychopathic, like, you're not feeling an emotional management to do. You're just not getting the same response everyone is. So there's much more of like well, I have to seek something out. I have to take intention and like plan or take action in order to get the feeling I want. I can't just like sit and go along with things.
I actually think that it's good that we've started talking about this unintentionally because we're going to talk about the movie Tar. But I do think this is the reason why some people react to the character of Lydia Tar negatively is that
Yes.
it doesn't seem to be one thing leads to another. She seems to be like, I make my own kind of magic about certain things. And I think that people don't like that. Like if you saw her doing, having an affair on her wife, for instance, and it was just kind of one thing led to another, that'd be one thing. But she seems to, and people are like, she grooms people. And is she
Yeah.
grooming people? Like, what does it mean to kind of groom people? It definitely she's aware of what's happening, and definitely she's trying to set up opportunities. And if that's grooming people,
Yeah.
then wow, I guess is it like too much to admit that maybe I'm a groomer? Like I don't know what the definition of groomer is, but if you're like intentionally kind of helping people to get to a particular place about things, then I guess is anyone not a groomer? you know?
Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting when you brought up earlier, um, like the notion of intention, because I found that like people who seem to be very emotionally sensitive and empathic, like intentions, they fixate on them and they also have like a high fear of them. Like people who are hyper intentional, who are very like kind of calculating, what am I doing? What effect is it going to have? And what do I want to get? And how am I going to change my behavior to do that? Like really is off putting to them. But I also see a lot of people who are more what I would consider empathic, really fixate on, well, I had good intentions. Like if something goes wrong, it's this sense of like, well, I didn't intend it to happen that way. I got swept up in the moment, or I had good intentions, or this and that. And I mean, my perspective has always been like, well, it sounds more like you just got good excuses. But I think there is like this, I don't know. I think it seems like that people who are emotionally connected or more emotionally sensitive, there's like a emotional there's all these emotional needs and feelings and wants they have, but they also have a lot of influence by society on how they can get those. And they have a lot of guilt and shame around just forcing their needs on other people or taking it. There's kind of these ways they're socialized into, I can't just act on any attraction I have, or I can't just act on my anger or my anxiety or sadness. So they get into these weird situations where they kind of start acting things out or behaving in a way or put themselves around people who will sort of allow it to happen while they can keep like an intention
Mm,
in their mind that that's not really what they wanted to do or they meant to do good or whatever it was. You know, sort of like
yes.
kind of I'm gonna get myself drunk because then I'll have the, confidence or whatever to make a pass on someone. And if they reject me, I won't feel bad. But if I was sober, it would feel like humiliating or feeling I did something wrong. Um, I don't
And
know.
for instance, yeah, if you get drunk and cheat on your spouse, the thing that maybe you truly want to do, but you could never kind of do
Yeah.
without some kind of plausible deniability. So this is interesting because I just had kind of this experience with two other women. We were kind of in like this community type situation. So we don't know each other well. And the one person, so we're all kind of volunteering to do this particular thing. And one of them is like, "Oh, can I help you? I can go ahead and take care of this task." And the other one is like, "Okay, sure." Kind of allows it to happen, but doesn't say, "Okay, sure." Just kind of allows it to happen. and then like secretly kind of talks to me about it and saying, like, yes, I really do want the help. I want people to just anticipate the help and do it. Then I feel so guilty about wanting that. So she
Yeah.
wants people to just guess, like, oh, let me just do that task for you without you having to ask. She wants that to be like what happens all the time. But then she feels really badly when people are actually doing the task, doing the thing that she wanted, because she's like, maybe I shouldn't have wanted that in the first place. And she worries, maybe I did something to kind of force that to happen. Like maybe I manipulated her some way, or maybe I
Mm.
should have been more this or that. And I'm kind of like, if she just offered, like at what point do these people kind of like, I don't know, let go? But I guess if you're kind of judging other people all the time for like having too strong of an intent and putting the wheels in motion all the time about everything, then if you would be super suspicious of that in your own self. Like that would be a very difficult thing to kind of reconcile in your own self. So I could see kind of why she felt the reluctance, but it just seems like a crazy way to live. Like I could
Oh
not
yeah.
understand it.
I mean, actually, it's interesting you said that because just the other day I was thinking about how I've often have experiences where I've been with a girl where we have some kind of, chemistry or it's, getting kind of flirty. And I found like if I've asked to give them a hug, asked to hold their hand, asked to kiss them, I've often found situations where they get agitated by that.
Mm,
My sense is like, oh, you should ask. You shouldn't just, hold someone's hand. You shouldn't just hug them. You shouldn't just kiss them. You should, get like proper consent and make sure you're on the same page. But I've seen people get agitated and even have moments where people have kind of blown up on me where they're just like, don't ask, just fucking do it. Like they just like kind of snap. And
mhm.
my my suspicion is that like, well, a lot of people it seems like, and it seems particularly prevalent in our culture, but it seems to be pretty cross-cultural too, is there's like this shame around wanting to
Mm.
have like a desire for something or wanting someone to do something or an expectation that someone does something. So if you want me to just make a move, um, but you feel bad about wanting it, or maybe you feel nervous about actually asking for it, you feel like that would be wrong or it'd be embarrassing, especially if I didn't want to, then me asking actually triggers you because it sort of like puts you back in that position of responsibility to admit you want it and to take authority over it rather than just me taking the reins and you kind of being able to let go.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And in fact, getting another kind of interesting aspect of Tar is, so Tar, hopefully people watching this have seen the movie. If not, probably just pause and go see the movie and then come back to this. Or, or I don't think that there's like, this isn't like that one of these types of movies, I think, where it's like, oh, the spoilers or something. Like I think
Yeah.
it's one of these type of movies where even if you knew what was happening, you'd still be freaked out. At least I I'm sure if I watch it again would be freaked out. Oh, you saw it twice. Were you
Yeah.
just as freaked out the second time?
No, I was actually able to enjoy it more because I wasn't so triggered.
Mm.
The first time I thought about leaving a couple times because it was like, I don't care if this ends in ruins or success. I just cannot tolerate waiting to see how this unfolds. And the second time around, I was like, okay, okay, I'm relaxed. I know how this goes. I can focus on the details, especially at the beginning more. Um, and yeah, so but it was kind of interesting though. The first time around, there was a lot more tension through the beginning, but then the ending especially became so like, what the fuck is going on? Um, and then the second time around, like obviously the surprise wasn't as novel, but I could appreciate the whole thing a lot more.
Right. Yeah. So I also was like super triggered. Arya was super triggered. Arya was probably even more triggered than I was. And I got like, we have a word, heart thoughts. Heart thoughts are like some of your like deepest kind of like worries or concerns or beliefs or desires. I got so many heart thoughts from her like the week following, just like reflecting, like she's like, I'm so glad that I started seeing a therapist. This could have been me. And I think that was my reaction too as I was watching
Mm,
it, is I thought she is going to run into problems, but I can see why, and yeah, it was just the second half of the movie, and this is not usually me, but I was like totally slunk in my chair, being like, like in a
Yeah.
defensive
Yeah.
position, like, oh, I'm getting so triggered by this because it just like, and I've seen maybe just a few things that talk about it. I don't think she's psychopathic necessarily. Like I wouldn't say 10 out of 10, but maybe 6 out of 10. There are
Yeah,
definitely
I
things
agree.
that, yeah, definitely things that she does that's reminiscent, and it almost makes me wonder certain things too, where you're like, it's almost as if they both her acting and the screenwriter seem to be kind of channeling psychopath with like without making her all psychopath. And I think that's kind of easy to do actually in the music world, especially with musical prodigies.
Yeah.
Seem to kind
Well,
of be a little that way.
the music world is so fascinating, especially with Prodigy, and especially with, I feel like, classical and academic based music kind of lineages. And you even see it in the film is there's so many people who are so like robotic and yet also constantly talking about like what is the emotional impact of the music? How does it affect people? Yet there's this like vicious obsession with precision, with your physical ability to control the instrument, to conduct the orchestra. Like there is this and I really love the beginning scene with her interview with the Times where she talked about like how I'm creating the illusion that everything is just happening and unfolding as it is, but really like I know exactly where I'm going from the beginning, and time is everything when it comes to, imparting that feeling onto the audience.
Yes.
Um but I
And
also
I
I
want
also
to,
love that scene where Sharon was like literally the only relationship you've ever had that wasn't transactional is with the I can't remember what she said, the one sleeping next door.
yes, the adopted daughter. Yes, so Sharon is
Yeah.
the wife or whatever. So yes, I totally agree with you. And we'll let's get back to this idea of time because I thought that was so masterful. The way that like it's a long movie, it's almost three
Oh
hours,
yeah.
but the way that they kind of like progress the time. Yeah, so we'll get back to it. But I thought yes, I completely agree with you. And to kind of give like my perspective or kind of like an illustration of what you mean by classical music, especially being like this very technical thing and very grounded in tradition and kind of status quo expectations while still trying to kind of pretend to be about like evoking emotions in others. So it says that she first started conducting at Cleveland, right? And Cleveland, surprisingly for some people, maybe is like one of the best American orchestras, traditionally has been. And a lot of the reason why I think is because Severance Hall, their traditional hall is happens to be like very acoustically pure. And as a consequence, the orchestra, my belief is, has had to play with greater clarity. They,
Oh.
their mistakes are not hidden in the bad acoustics the same way that,
Mm.
for instance, the New York Philharmonic famously I think a little bit, has been kind of known as a big and kind of like muddy orchestra because their hall, had kind of bad acoustics. And they just got a new hall, and I'm super excited to go see them perform in their new hall in a couple months. So, but yeah, so Cleveland, very renowned and kind of just an accident. I don't even know that they knew that much about acoustics when they were designing these halls. Nothing like they know nowadays where they can,
Yeah.
do all the, computer, whatever calculations about it. So Cleveland just happened to be, a place where great musicians would go to. And Cleveland also is a very an American orchestra, I would say, in the sense of, and I'll give you the example that I'm most familiar with, but there's, I'm sure, numerous examples of the way that they kind of break from tradition, especially from European tradition. So timpanists, the kettle drum players, like at Cleveland, etc., a lot of other American orchestras will add notes to their part. So if they're playing a Mozart, whatever, symphony, concerto, and they think that, so it's like dun, 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 dun,
Hmm.
dun, dun, dun. That last note would be like a note that would not be available to a Mozartian orchestra, right? Because they just
Oh.
had the two timpani notes, right? Just two timpani drums. Now they have four, and it's really easy to change the pitch. So you can have any note anytime. So whenever they think that like Mozart would have written another note if he had the same timpani that we have today, if his orchestra had modern timpani, then he would have, actually written in the note for timpani, then they'll add it. They just add
Oh,
notes
yeah.
to Mozart. They add it to Beethoven, they add it to whatever. So that's a very American thing, but the European timpanists do not. They're super strict about it. They're like, "No, that's what's written, and we're just gonna stick with what's written." So the Americans, I think, are closer to kind of what we would expect, her to be talking about, so much, the emotions and the meaning and the intent of the composer, because that's what you're trying to do is trying to say, would Mozart have, can we derive his intent such that we can say he would have added this note if it was technologically possible at the time, given the instruments he had at his disposal. And then they will go ahead and like via this kind of thought experiment add whatever notes, but the Europeans don't. They just stick to what's written on the paper, and they're very, I guess, more rigid that way. So it's interesting that she goes from, I think her trajectory is, she goes from Cleveland, which is probably the most American and kind of open-minded traditionally of the American great orchestras, to I think Philadelphia, to New York. And so that's increasingly getting more conservative, more kind of the European
Oh,
style.
yeah.
And then she ends up at Berlin
Yeah, Berlin.
Philharmonic, yeah, which is like as stodgy as you can kind of get. So I think it's interesting that yes, I guess Berlin is considered better, but some people do think Cleveland's better, but she didn't just stop there. She didn't even go to, like maybe a Chicago with a great orchestra or something, great players could be better than Berlin. It was like she really wanted that association with that tradition, and kind of at what cost, because she ends up being an American in Berlin, and some of her American ideas, get kind of a little bit rejected. So it is kind of a weird. I think the other thing I didn't like about it that kind of triggered me is, one thing I've been a little more mindful of recently is in what ways do I still mutilate myself in order to
Mm,
kind of get along with people, to fit, like a square peg, round hole type thing,
yeah.
where I'm like, let's just kind of make this work, let's make it work for like this holiday, or let's make it work for this
Yeah.
interaction, this professional, like I hate this client, but let's just whatever, say that I think these things, and don't say these other things, And I think that that's an interesting way of seeing her trajectory, is to what extent has she mutilated herself or had to kind of become somebody else in order to get to the places where she's gone, and to what extent is, some of her actions which can't really be explained perhaps any other way than saying that they're self-destructive. Like I don't think things happen to her, things. I think she makes bad things happen to her. She's
Yeah.
kind of like doing these self-destructive things, but maybe it's because she just hates that she has to, in order for
Yeah.
her to even reach these heights, she has to be a different person. She used to be Linda. Now it's
Yes.
Lydia.
Lydia, yes.
And when she goes back to her home, at the end after her fall from grace, she even uses a different accent and a different way of speaking, like with her
Oh,
brother.
yes. Yes. Well, I thought it was also interesting. There's that scene where she's teaching the class, and there's that one student who, talks about his identity as, I think, like he says, like BIPOC, pangender, or something. And they
Mm.
kind of get into this debate over, like, can you appreciate Bach, even though he was, white, male, heterosexual, fathered many children, Christian, and
20 kids. I forgot that it was
20.
20.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
lot. I was like,
wild. That's insane. That blows my mind. 20. Oh my god. But then there's that moment where she's like, you have to obliterate yourself before everyone, like the world.
oh,
Do you
I
remember that?
forgot that. Yes.
Like
That
she
is
makes this
such a
comment, she's like, I'm a U-Haul lesbian, but I had to like strip my identity, stand before God and the world, and just obliterate myself. I was like, oh my god.
yes. That is so true. That is yeah, they have such different understandings of identity. And now as I'm kind of saying this, this is like you mentioning this and talking about this I hadn't thought this before, but the movie does seem to explore a lot of identity aspects. Obviously, so we have, this BIPOC student at Juilliard, and she's kind of like, but even she kind of pushes back on some of his identity things because she's like, why did you choose Juilliard? You
Mm,
know?
mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Well, it's a good school or something." And she's like, "Certainly it's a name brand school. It's a it's a label.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna be Juilliard educated for the rest of your life." And in law actually like Harvard Harvard Law's probably kind of known this, like Legally Blonde, she goes to Harvard, right? She doesn't go to
Oh,
Yale,
yeah.
which is the
Yeah.
best school, or Stanford, which is the second best school, or even Chicago, which is currently ranked above Harvard, but she goes to Harvard, right? And so it's like, well, why would you choose Harvard maybe over Yale? It's because, as one of my law school classmates who went to Harvard for undergrad said, it's the H bomb factor. It's like when you say Harvard.
Yeah.
Then people are like, "Whoa!" So yeah, Juilliard is like that in the music world, I think. And so she asked a legitimate question: "Why are you at Juilliard?" And Juilliard, similarly to like what I've just mentioned with law schools and undergrads, is not considered the best school. She says, Curtis and some of these other, did she say Eastman or Manhattan School of Music? There are several schools that are considered probably, better and for sure competitive to Juilliard. So if you're choosing Juilliard, especially as a musician, I think, because they have plenty of performance arts subjects that are great, but uh, but I guess if you're like a dancer, like a ballet dancer, like Juilliard just doesn't specialize in music. There's so many things that it does. But if you go to like a musical conservatory, then they specialize in music. So like that, I think is another interesting thing. So she kind of prods him about this, and she said it can't be for just the label. And I think she's actually generous to him for that because he probably did go to Juilliard just for the label.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, "It must be because you know somebody from Juilliard who, enjoyed it." But I think that maybe is the first thing that puts him on the defensive, because the chances of him knowing somebody from Juilliard, as a person of color, is probably not true. I think most people that go to
Yeah.
Juilliard probably don't know people that go to Juilliard. It does seem like mostly a meritocracy type school. And unless you just happen to have like other genius prodigy musicians in your family. Yeah,
Yeah.
or are in that kind of social class where people are like groomed to become ballerinas or groomed to become
Yeah.
professional pianists, etc., because they have the sufficient wealth and other means to do it. He probably doesn't know people's. He probably did just go to Juilliard because in the common whatever about music schools, Juilliard is the one that everybody seems to recognize. If there are movies
Yeah.
about musicians, they're going to Juilliard the same way that Legally Blonde are
Yeah.
going to Harvard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, and there's another. I thought it was sort of ironic how at the end of their interaction, he obviously feels this like offense at the way
Mhm.
she's sort of like prodding at him and picking at him about the way he identifies himself and his relationship to Bach and appreciating Bach. But I also think it's ironic how he then leaves by just calling her a fucking bitch. Like,
Yes.
wow, bro, the hypocrisy. Like, you're literally gonna draw on like one of the most like well-known, like misogynistic, like possible put downs you could come up with. Like, it's just like that whole scene is just like, oh my god, there's so much going on.
Yes, yes, I love this scene. Yeah, and it is kind of true because he has like all of these kind of identities, and he kind of says it, right? He says, I forget, he said something like pangender maybe too, as a pangender
Yeah,
person of
yeah,
color, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There were like two or three other labels. So I think, yeah, number one, he probably did choose Juilliard as a label, and that there's nothing kind of wrong with that. But like people who kind of seek these labels, and whereas she is saying she wants her identity obliterated to like further the cause of whatever
yeah,
is happening, is such a different approach. He's assuming the labels to try to get what he wants in the world, and she's trying to eliminate all labels
yeah,
to try to get what she wants in the world. She wants to be genderless. She wants to be, like just this person, this like instrument, not in a musical way, but like mechanically as like the means, the vehicle, the vessel of just furthering whatever her goal happens to be in that moment. And that's a very psychopathic trait.
Yes, yes. Well, that's what reminded me of like what we talked about last time, where I brought up the notion of like identity of being versus identity of action.
Yes,
Like,
that was your phrases, your two phrases. I didn't
yeah,
remember that. Yeah.
he was trying to like he's trying to just attain these like labels, and she's like trying to become this vessel. And I mean, I think it's
Yes.
also interesting when you're talking about how she's had this interesting history of following things that are both hyper orthodox and unorthodox. She also like lived with the Shipibo people of Peru, um, and studied in the rainforest of the Amazon, which is like so at odds with like the Berlin,
Yes.
very like elaborate orchestras. But also, I mean, the Shipibo people in Peru are known for their ayahuasca ceremonies.
Mm.
Like they're known for their use of these like highly psychedelic plants, that they brew into ayahuasca and consume. And like she talks about this Icaros, like they have these songs, and basically it's like it's delivered to you from a spirit. I mean, she's like very much kind of her attention, and as well as like the practice, is on like that whole notion of like being a vessel. Like you put
Mm.
yourself into this state, and then you become a vessel, a channel for the spirit to manifest within you, and that's where the song comes from. um
Yes.
Highly improvisational too, rather than the like very like sort of European, everything is rehearsed and premeditated.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. Yes, and that is interesting because you're like, what? Yeah, what is the connection between the Berlin being a conductor of Berlin and these? I'll have to get the spelling from you.
Oh
For
yeah.
the I haven't looked into these Peruvian things, but I will now, and thank you so much for adding this. But the connection seems to be that as a conductor, all you are is interpreting. You're not even playing.
Hmm.
You're contributing zero
Yeah.
in a way to the music. You are just facilitating the occurrence of music being played by others, right? So it truly is kind of this sublimation of identity into the composer. And the way she talks about it too, that's how you can tell that's how she conceives of it herself. Is that she's not kind of adding new things, although she certainly is, but she kind of tries to say that she's just trying to serve the intent of the composer, right? What do you think the composer intended? What do you think the audience's experience is? And so it's always in everything that she's doing is intended to further somebody else's at least surface is to serve somebody else's mission and intent, the composer, or to achieve a particular effect in somebody else, the audience. And I can see how that led to like great success for her as a conductor, which her character is like known for being, the best potentially living conductor and certainly one of the top of all time. So yeah, that's such an interesting connection.
Well,
But go
the
ahead.
I was gonna say, there's kind of an interesting parallel with so the Shipibo people, when they go through ayahuasca ceremonies, the conductor kind of becomes the musician, because they'll be the ceremony will be, I guess, performed by a shaman. And the shaman will give the people within the ceremony ayahuasca, this very psychedelic brew, but then they will consume some of it themselves too. And what their kind of role ends up becoming is sort of this in between guide of our world and the spirit world. And they
The shaman
engage.
does?
Yes, yes. So the
But
shaman.
who's the singer? Is the shaman the one singing?
Yes. So
Oh, the shaman's the singer.
the shaman, yeah, they basically will call upon kind of the spirits, so to speak. I mean, my language around this probably is somewhat, I don't know exactly what kind of language they would use to describe it, but from what I've read, they put themselves into this kind of psychedelic state where they are able to tap into the energies and the spirits, outside of our normal perception. And then they basically channel these spirits into song, which becomes the Icaros that they perform. And they will modify these based upon the energy and the state of the people in the ceremony that they are trying to. It's supposed to be healing. Like
Mm.
it's considered to be like extremely therapeutic and healing, also extremely intense and overwhelming. But they are sort of modifying or moderating and observing the energies and the psychological state of the people in the ceremony, and then helping to direct certain spirits towards them, or that they evoke through song. And so they kind of become this weird mix of both the conductor and the orchestra itself, but have like this vision into the audience in a way that, you don't have as like a classical conductor. Your audience generally is not on an intense psychedelic experience. And also you're not necessarily performing the music itself. And it's very interesting too, because they can be conducted with multiple shamans, but the idea of just one shaman and several people is also extremely common too.
Huh. It's so interesting when we kind of talk about this to even think about the name conductor. Conductor is just something that, takes is a connection between one
Yes.
thing and another. Yeah.
Well, I've started to visualize too, just thinking about people in general, as like I had some sort of like image in my head, I think about a year ago, where I was like, oh, we're all literally just like actual antennas. Like we're just
Mm.
walking around, like we physically like look like antennas. We got this little like bulb at the top. Um, and I mean, there's so many mysteries around consciousness and the nature of like what are thoughts and where do they come from, and aspects of feeling, that there is this weird, I mean, everything's a conductor. We literally conduct electricity. Like there's a strange phenomenon to it. But there's also, I would highly recommend, I have to find the book. And once I find it, I'll send it to you. But reading about like the Shipio people, their musical traditions and the ayahuasca traditions are super fascinating and really wild, because not only do they like perform music for these people, but I was reading one book about a man who spent many years in the Amazon going through these ceremonies, and he talked about like the shamans saying that they would like literally see, um like as he was in the ceremony, he would basically have a vision of them performing actual surgery on people, like
Yeah.
literally cutting people open, removing organs, removing like toxic uh like tumors and stuff from the organs, and then putting it back in. And then, eventually he would wake up after all the ceremony was over. And, of course, none of this happened physically. But everyone will have had the collective notion that like a surgery took place. And that's kind
Mm.
of the other weird, interesting about it too, is like if you think about a really well rehearsed musical group, um, when musicians talk about their peak performances, there is this unusual experience they talk about of like being connected with everyone, losing a sense of consciousness over what's happening, kind of entering into this state where like I'm not the one performing, something just struck me, something just hit me, and then they kind of emerge from it later, and then they think about like, oh shit, what happened during the show? Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So I have three thoughts. I want to get to all of them. One is a quick one about an opera I just saw. Two, I want you to help remind me about this idea of conductors and getting back to the conductor, the student conductor, the Juilliard student.
Oh yeah,
Can you help remind me that one? And
yeah.
then three is Mormon beliefs about this. So first, yes, I totally agree that musicians and I think a lot of creatives uh often kind of report that there's certain instances in which they feel like it's not them who is doing the writing or the playing, but it is something. It's almost like they get out of the way and the thing just happens. So I went to go see this opera premiere. I guess it's not a premiere. This is the second time it's been staged. Uh, so it's a very new opera though. So with the LA Opera called Omar, and it's one of the few first person accounts of a slave from North Carolina who was brought across on the Middle Passage. And the composer is also the composer of the film scores for the Jordan Peele movies, like Get Out
Oh,
and Nope. Yeah. So I think is biracial. And he said he was raised by the white side of his family, but has also spent like quite a bit of time trying to understand, like multiple different musical genres, of course, but particularly African American and African musical genres, studying them and being kind of immersed with them. And he talked about how this person, Omar, who was, basically kidnapped, I think from Senegal, was kidnapped from there, I think in like 1708, I want to say 1704. So like still, I mean, I forget when in the United States the slave trade was shut down, like the 1740s or something. And then you could still have slaves, but you couldn't
Oh yeah, you
import
couldn't
them any
import.
longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like a fear, like a racist fear that there were just being too many slaves, and then
Yeah.
eventually there would be like an uprising that they couldn't control. So he kind of sneaks in, or he comes before that limitation. But since he was 37 when he was kidnapped, he was literate, so he could read and write in Arabic, and he was Muslim. And so his one of his masters, his second master, who was better, he escaped the first one, allowed him to write his autobiography. And so it's one of the rare first person accounts of like the Middle Passage, the idea of getting kidnapped from the west coast of Africa and being taken to first South Carolina. Charleston is where he came, and then he escaped and made it to North Carolina and kind of lived there the rest of his days. And there's even a photograph of him, of Omar the slave. And I guess he was kind of known as being kind of like an oddity, like this slave that could like read and write in Arabic, which would have seemed like a very, very, I guess, exotic for a lot of different reasons. But the composer was talking about, one of the composers, there were two composers, was talking about how he had always had the idea there was kind of a guitar like instrument in Senegal. And he had always had the idea to use the harp as kind of like this guitar type instrument, but just kind of put it off, and was focused on other things until one day he just sat down and was like, okay, let's add all the harp parts. And he felt like that was the moment, adding those harp parts, where he was just like in complete flow, like where it wasn't him writing the parts at all. He just had to, almost like dictate, like they were being dictated to him, and he was just like a scribe writing them down. So yeah, I do think that there is like this common idea often in music and probably other performance arts, where it's no longer you doing the thing. And I think people crave that feeling, perhaps for the
Yeah.
reasons we talked about before, the being identity versus acting identity. But I also think it's probably because the thing seems to be better than anything you could have come up with,
Yes.
seems to be almost coming from a source higher, better than you. And so it's interesting when you say these things about, can you tell me again the tribe name?
Oh, the Shipibo?
Shapibo,
Yeah.
Shapibo,
I think it's Shipibo.
Shipibo. Okay, Shapibo. So the Shapibo people. So if you read, there's a book written by a Mormon person. It's not like kind of necessarily Mormon doctrine, but it's called Visions of Glory, I think. And the person talks about, it's written under a pseudonym, but he talks about how he has had so many near death experiences for whatever reason, and he's had all these visions that he has kind of collected over the years from these near death experiences. And he talks about something very similar, that the spirits kind of perform like a sort of surgery on people, like there are spirits around us. And kind of you'll read this sometime in the Bible and sometimes in like Mormon theology. They sometimes say like ministering angels, but I
Mm.
think that term is also used in the Bible. And the ministering angels are like, they like reach inside the body and they're like doing things, to the
Yeah.
body, to actually influence the body. So it's interesting that there is that sort of connection. And I myself have gotten interested, because if you're Mormon, then you're like, sure, what are these ministering angels? I've kind of gone down on a rabbit hole about this, and I'm starting to wonder if this is totally off topic.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You to get back on topic
Okay, yeah.
with the prompt that you're supposed to ask us about. But it's interesting that this connection, and that the gift of tongues, I've started to wonder if the gift of tongues is like the ability to kind of communicate with these ministering angels and to kind of prompt them to do certain things, to not like command them in this way that they are kind of slaves, but to kind of command them in the way that, like a conductor commands the orchestra. in which you kind of
Yes.
lead them, you kind of direct them to do particular things on behalf of yourself or on behalf of other people. And that maybe that is what is meant by the gift of tongues, because there is that scripture in First or Second Corinthians, I think, where I think it's Paul says, "Though I speak with the tongue of angels and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing." That's like a paraphrase or whatever. But so it is interesting, like this Shipibo belief is not so different, I think, from Christian beliefs, particularly around the time of, just post Christ's death, the Mount of Transfiguration. And if you kind of read in the New Testament, there's so many instances in which they talk about, stop speaking so much in tongues and only caring about speaking in tongues and
Oh,
instead
yes.
instead prophesy, or instead kind of focus on like the doctrine of Christ is what they often suggest. So it's interesting to think something so foreign, but really is kind of echoed in different other cultural traditions. But what was the prompt again? The
Oh, well, can I ask one? I've got it, but
Yeah,
can I ask one
yeah,
thing
yeah, yeah.
before? There
Uh-huh.
does seem like um there's an interesting like theme that seems to come up throughout all cultures and like spiritual traditions, is this like weird dynamic between everything in the physical world wants to touch the spiritual, and everything in the spiritual is trying to engage with the physical.
Yes.
And I find it quite interesting that you even brought up like near death experiences, because um the experience of like intense psychedelic rituals have been associated with near death experiences, and a lot of tribes across the globe, like different hunter gatherer tribes and stuff, really actually value near death experiences and talk about like this extreme, when you get into these extreme states, it it almost like, I mean, it's kind of that like born from the ashes, like the ego dies and you are reborn again, a new person. When you lose complete control of a situation and yet you are still able to survive or persevere through, it sort of like resets like kind of transforms a person. And I do wonder if there's sort of, both in near death experiences and in like intense like psychedelic rituals, if the like actual nervous system, the like patterns of brain waves that are happening just get so like thrown out of whack or sent into such an extreme state that it kind of like, I don't know, like rebalances it, like
Yeah.
it dumps stress from the body, or it puts you in such like a hibernational kind of state where something gets to balance out all the stress, all the information that is constantly like clouding your mind and preventing you from thinking clearly or focusing on what's just happening in the moment. If you're literally in the moment about to die or feel that way, then you kind of get forcibly like funneled towards just being like hyper grounded in what is present, rather than lost in like all this, sort of what's going to happen tomorrow, when's this going to happen, and who's thinking this and who's judging me, and all these kind of cluttered thoughts that people talk about.
Yeah. So it's interesting you say that. I totally agree. And like in my own kind of meditations, like readings and kind of meditations on this, I kind of I agree with you that there's something about the gift of tongues that just seems to, if it is kind of this communicating with the spirit world, or to be able to kind of invite them into this world, that like somehow connecting the two worlds, that there's something about it that's really just kind of seeing things different. It's just a different perspective. And I think kind of like, again, the Mormon belief is that people's spirits, so this is not the first birth that you've had, that you had a birth prior to this. So you had an
Okay.
existence prior to this that they call the pre-existence. Right? So the in your pre-existent self, you don't have a body though. So this is your first time incarnate, right, with a corporeal form, where you're, and the idea of now you have so many senses. You have like the five basic senses, and you're just constantly experiencing the world through like this like almost mega spotlight of you. And there's just so many kind of sensory experiences that you're just naturally overwhelmed by the constant demands of the information that you're taking in as a result of a body. And that really is the sometimes again, Mormon theology, but I think Christian theology too, we sometimes talk about like a veil, of there being a veil between this world and between the spirit world. But I think the veil is like an intentional thing. Like it's intentional because in this body, you're experiencing so many, it's just so much stimuli that you're having to constantly process that you no longer even look to certain other things that are reality, but they're not reality that's easily perceived by your physical senses, right? Like it's not a light wave, it's not a sound wave, it's not a, a touch, it is not a taste.
Yeah.
And so your focus as a child, as a baby, I guess, is to kind of keep focusing on those things because those are the things that are rewarded. Kind of in that very, I just read this like this Christmas play, is it Polar Express or something? That you can hear like Santa's bells or something if you still believe, but as you grow older, you stop
Oh,
hearing them or something.
yes, yes.
So kind of in
Yeah.
that sort of way where you had that capacity, but you kind of lost it because you started focusing on different things, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but that in order to kind of get more in touch with that, like this idea of people having an out of body experience, I don't think it's literally, but I think the sensation, it's kind of literally in that they no longer are paying attention to their body sensations as the primary sense, of
Yeah.
relating to the world, but they're paying attention to this something else that's not, their typical body sensations. And that is why the near death experiences kind of trigger this, is because their body becomes so unimportant that they're again able to see like what some people might say with their spiritual eyes, or their
Yeah.
spiritual perception, the thing that's been there this whole time, but you've just been so hyper focused on your visual spectrum.
Well, it's so interesting you say that too, because like even if you look at like the physical senses, they're so limited. Like the amount of the light spectrum we can see, the degree to which we can detect sound is like nothing.
Yes.
and and when you think about like I love watching videos where they talk about like just how different various animals have must perceive things based off of what kind of sensory information they're getting. I mean, it's astounding how like it would be amazing being able to just like be a snake for a day or like a
Mhm.
bird. I mean, the level like that what blows my mind is the way like owls and stuff can track like micro like just tiny little like mice in a field while they're like flying down at like 30 miles an hour. It's just like a whole nother world. So you got to imagine, yeah, there's just so much outside of our ability to perceive and to understand. And
Yeah.
I had been somewhat vaguely familiar with like Mormon theology before meeting you, but not really much. And most of it, I think, came in the form of just like pop cultural people mocking Mormon theology. Um,
Mhm.
but I was really interested whenever I first started talking to you about how much there seems to be these parallels with like Eastern philosophies, Buddhism, yogic tradition, karmic tradition, like notions of being existing in the before, being born again, there being these like entities that exist outside of that. I guess like as you say that it exists throughout different Christian theology too, but a lot of the Christian theology that I grew up around and through a lot of America and especially in the Bible Belt, it's like so literalized. Like it is very much like God created the world in 7 days. There
Mhm.
was a literal Adam and Eve from which we all came from. All these sort of stories that uh, others profess are like being metaphorical or analogies or are really just supposed to direct your attention to how much is outside of your understanding. They just got turned into like these very literal principles. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Mormonism's now interesting to me. I thought they were supposed to be the most boring ones.
Yeah. They're kind of sci-fi, I think, out of the Christian religions. They're like, oh,
Yeah,
consciousness developed on another planet. That's like sci-fi to me. So
yeah.
I do I think I have one kind of example of weird use of senses that human has done. And it was this boy, you can probably look it up. There was like some CBS, ABC News or something special about him. He lost his eyeballs, I guess, to cancer as a child. and maybe young enough or something, he started to use echolocation. So you can watch him ride a
Oh,
bike or play
yes.
basketball.
That is
Yes.
amazing. That blows my mind.
Yes. They kind of visualize it a little bit. So he makes these clicking noises. If he's not talking, then he's making clicking noises so he can hear the sound kind of reverberate from the sense of his own position in the world, right? Like his own spatial position. But that kind of seems crazy to me. But yeah, the infrared, ultraviolet, that we're just not aware of, but are still in the light spectrum, but we just don't see it. And there was another one that I was thinking about. Oh, so I just got my first 5-string bass, electric bass, and it's
Oh,
funny
yeah.
because the couple half steps right below the normal register of a bass, you can really hear the tone well. I can hear it well. And I was playing with a friend, but the lowest note, if you play like the B, like an open string on that
Yeah.
note, you can't kind of hear it as a pitch at all. And my friend was like, "That's so weird how like that doesn't sound like a note to me. That just sounds
Yeah.
like a timbre." And I was like, "Well, I think that our ears just naturally develop to hear mostly the human voice. And it's
Yeah.
so low, so much lower than the human voice that our ears can't really make sense of it, the same way that they can if it would have just been like a fifth above, which is the normal register of the bass." So, yeah, it's interesting the
You know,
limitations of our senses.
I was gonna say that kind of had a thing pop into my head from you saying that is, um, I think I once read an article that was talking about how uh, baby talk is actually good because infants cannot mimic like the sound of like a grown man's voice or even a grown
Mhm.
woman's. And there's actually a good value to talking in sort of a babbly way because it's closer for them to understand. And then if they want to actually be able to pronounce language, they need to hear it in more of like a childlike way.
Hmm.
Because they can more easily mimic that. But yeah, it's like you said, like the human voice and our ears are attuned to like understanding each other, not hearing
Yeah.
these like super like sub, I don't know, harmonic frequencies or whatever.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
is
So
odd too, like the way you get to tonal sounds versus like timbres and like
mm,
rhythmic beats, but they technically are like hitting somewhere in like a tonal range.
yes, because everything has a tone. Like the building I'm in has like a pitch that
Yeah.
it will resonate with, and that's why sometimes we get these problems with bridges collapsing because like the wind is vibrating it at that pitch or whatever,
Oh,
which then
whoa. Okay.
amplifies the pitch. Well, you've probably seen like on like these TV shows where like a opera singer sings a pitch and then glasses shatter.
Yeah, it shatters.
And it is a thing, but it's not necessarily a high pitch. It's just if you're singing a pitch strong enough to, if the glass is tuned to a particular pitch really clearly, and if you're like putting that pitch strong enough into that glass, then it will vibrate. It will resonate with the pitch and keep resonating and amplifying and amplifying and amplifying until eventually it can shatter. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is interesting. Like, and one of my friends was like an art history major, and she was maybe I want to say jealous. I'll say jealous, although she may characterize it differently. But with musicians and music, because she's like, it's just a like almost like a mystical world because art, even when it's non-representational art, is representational of something. It is something that is like something familiar that you could be like square or circle or kind of oval or whatever slash. But like how do you describe a timbre, or how do you describe a pitch, or how do you describe a concerto? There it really is more abstract, and I think that was what she was kind of jealous of, is that it seemed to have fewer limitations. So I think too that it was really interesting, this movie Tar, that they frame everything in terms of this musical world, which already has fewer limitations. Like the limitations we have are kind of self-imposed, where it's like, here's sonata form, first
Oh, yeah.
the exposition, the development, the whatever, the recapitulation. And when we learn and study these different things, here are the rules of counterpoint, here are the rules of this and that. And some of them have like reflection in the realities of sound. Like when I'm even talking at this pitch, I'm not just speaking at this pitch, but the harmonic series is there's
Oh,
also
yeah.
going to be, yeah, the octave above, the fifth above that, the fourth above that, which is yet another octave, et cetera, et cetera. So there are certain things where just like the physical realities of sound, certain notes do sound better together because
Yeah.
the harmonic series line up or not. I was just reading this about steel drums actually, is that they used to just tune the steel drum to like the fundamental pitch. And then they started realizing that the steel drum sounds so much brighter if you can also get the octave above and then the fifth above and the octave above that. So get the first 3 or 4 partials in that harmonic series also in tune, then it has like a much better sound than it would,
Oh,
cuts
yeah.
through. And opera singers do this intentionally by distorting the vowels. That's why it's so hard to understand opera singers, is because they're trying to distort the vowels to get these to manipulate the harmonic series to be able
Oh,
to cut through the orchestra.
wow, interesting.
Yeah.
I can't remember the details, but I know I've watched a video on, like, the evolution of stringed instruments into the guitar and how much, like, tuning's changed over time in order to, like, maximize that, like, resonant frequency.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it does seem it's really odd though. I actually just the other day was at band practice and was intrigued by we were rehearsing we were trying to learn a new cover song and our singer was the only one who could hear while we were listening to it. He's like, there's another riff being played under the main guitar part in the section. And none of
Oh.
us could hear it, and he kept insisting on it. And eventually, I felt like I heard it a bit here and there, but I really didn't notice it. And the other guys, as they started to listen more, they could eventually like zero in on it. But what was interesting is I was noticing this like really high note that felt like kind of like when a guitar soloist like just hits like a really high note and he kind of just holds it and kind of bends it slowly. I noticed that the
Mhm.
whole time, and none of them were picking up on that. So by the end of it, I was like, "Do any of us know what the hell we're hearing?" Uh,
Yes, I
but
have another story that's like this that yeah, you can look it up. It's called Tambu Bamboo, where they use bamboo sticks. I want to say in Trinidad and Tobago to kind of
oh,
like,
okay.
yeah, in melodic ways, but not super precise melodic ways. So in this, I did a performance with a percussion ensemble once of this, where there were 4 main kind of like bass sounding bamboo things, which were really just PVC pipes,
Oh,
for
yes,
yeah,
yes.
for functionality of a Western, yeah, percussion ensemble. So like the each person, so there were 4 people playing this. So each person had one of these big things and it would go like this, boom, ba da 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 da, or other kind of little bass lines, that you'd have to like coordinate with the other 4 people to play. But then when we went to the performance, 2 of them got mixed up. And so the one that should have been the lowest, the person playing second lowest had it, and the one who had the second lowest went to the lowest. So instead of like boom, ba da dun dun, it was like this da 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 da. So the whole time it's like mixed up because they just mixed up the different sizes of the bamboos. So I'm like being driven crazy the entire time by this, being like, I can't believe this. And is it possible to trade? And maybe, we can just quickly get these people to trade because my brain's like melting listening to this being played so differently. And then at the end, I was like, wasn't that crazy how we mixed up the bamboo sticks for the 4 bass? And the people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I was like, yeah, it did happen. And nobody believed me. Nobody believed me until we were
Wow.
like later listening to the recording. And I was like, I told you. But it's weird. This was a group of musicians
Yeah,
that just
yeah.
they didn't perceive it. They just heard what they had expected to hear instead of hearing what was actually there. So I think getting back to, and I think I do remember this, getting back to like this idea of the foil almost that this like person of color conductor student at Juilliard plays, where he is even more, ensconced in this idea of identity as being like like your conducting, your musical expression is rooted in your own personal identity. And her idea is like, no, conducting is just connecting, the past, something in the past, even if it's the recent past, with the present. This is how we do live music and art music. It's written down and then it's communicated this way, and it's always been this way. And her idea is like, who cares if it's Bach or if it's anybody. She even mentioned, she's like, I don't personally like Beethoven, but when I conduct Beethoven, I have to like confront his genius essentially, and she still conducts Beethoven, no problem, because I think she perceives herself as being just a different role of identity. He thinks that music comes from your own personal identity, and she kind of thinks, especially as a conductor, and he is a conducting student, that that the conductor is just this channel, and it probably is influenced by her experience with the Shipibo people.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, yeah, she does mention, I think, in is it the in the when she's being interviewed in the beginning, she talks about, or maybe it's later, she's talking about, I think, Mahler, and how he had this like notion of you can go back and look upon the past and find these moments that at the time you didn't see as significant, but now you see like set off this chain of events. But then she described, I think, herself as being more akin to some other musician who like the Shipibo had this sense of like it is like delivered to you, like you are connecting in the moment or something. And that is like the, I guess, I don't know, I can't remember the exact context of like that's the height of significance in what makes a performance so meaningful or something. I'm not sure, but I yeah, I don't know, the notion of being a vessel and channeling. I think it's interesting because in that moment and what she talks about and throughout the movie, her behavior, it's something that I think demonstrates very like psychopathic qualities, but
Yes.
also like highly empathic qualities
Hmm.
to this degree where you're like, I'm gonna get all of myself out of the way to show your genius. Like your ability musically, the way you can move people, your whatever it is, like I'm going to put aside our labels as what we are in the context of our society, and I'm just going to try to channel what it is you accomplished um without
Yeah.
really myself in regard.
Yes. Yeah, she removes things from their context and kind of takes them to kind of this higher plane that I think we were talking about musicians like to get to, where it feels like you're no longer the one writing or performing, but it's like the thing is happening, it's as if it has an inevitability, right? And it's not necessarily rooted in who you are as a person anymore. It is just, something that seems so kind of purely true, and purely right about reality, purely accurate and reflecting some aspect of reality, that it feels like you really are just a vessel. So I do feel like musicians do experience this, and I think often crave it. And I think the audiences probably respond to this most. But there is that tension then, as we said, between like identity. And I agree with you about it, like psychopaths, for various reasons, I have said before, have like very weak sense of self, is my understanding of psychopathy or my experience talking to people. So in the absence of a strong sense of self, it's really easy to allow yourself to kind of become the vessel. Like it's easy, people think of like psychopaths as being narcissists, but it's actually very easy for a psychopath to kind of get over themselves. You
Mhm.
know? Like it's like a very small step, it's like a 6-inch like leap to make, versus other people, maybe it's closer to a 6-foot leap because they're so ensconced in their own identity and their own kind of, perspective of the world as kind of filtered by their senses, like it's a very much embodied sense. It's a very much embodied experience. And psychopaths don't tend to be embodied in the same way that
Well, it's so
non-psychopaths are.
there's such this irony because people regard psychopaths as being like so narcissistic, but they also are so aware of like how like chameleonic psychopaths are. Like they
Yes.
literally abandon anything they come from, put on a whole new look, a style, a voice, will embody something else entirely. And yes, certainly it is often can be used to fill their own goals, fill their needs. Perhaps it is involved with abusive or toxic behavior, but they're still just completely abandoning any notion of who they are.
Yes.
and and even also the risk-taking behavior, running into burning buildings, putting themselves in situations of extreme personal risk. um so there is such this like, yeah, irony around it. I
Yeah, the impulsivity, the ability to just kind of like do something different, radically different than you were doing before is something that, as you mentioned, has like its kind of ups and downs, but it's just something that, yeah, psychopaths for better or for worse, are better at. And I do think it's because they're not so, like, again, using this word, ensconced in like
Yeah.
the context of now, the context of who they are, the context of what's happening, their identities, this current culture, this current, the current kind of politics, the current kind of norms, social norms.
Well, and I think it's also so interesting, there's this another like amazing duality with psychopaths where they're feared for this like hyper intentional, hyper calculating nature, and then also are known for being hyper impulsive. So
Hmm.
it's like I'm gonna plan out this whole house of cards and then fuck it, just boom out the window, just acting on impulse, shooting from the hip sort of thing. Like it is this interesting swing and like combination that
Yes.
seems to exist. I um I thought about one thing earlier that I wanted to ask you was, have you ever heard of let's see, how did this come up? I can't remember exactly what come up, so I'll just start talking about it. Maybe I'll have context. But there's this woman who supposedly uh got brain damage at some point in her life. She was in an accident. I can't remember exactly what. And as she was recovering in the hospital, I think she was French, and she found she could just speak like fluent Mandarin. And and everyone, I think there's been a lot of people try to debunk it, but she grew up her whole life only speaking French. I think she learned English in school too, but never learned any Mandarin whatsoever, had never been to China, did not watch like Chinese shows or anything like that, and then just could speak Mandarin. And they really have no explanation for it, other than perhaps she's just lying. Um, but it is one of those things where, I mean, same with like the speaking in tongues, or I don't know, the weird like mysteries of consciousness is like the nature of language, um, how language is created and established and how it is learned. I mean, that's the other thing too. I think it was like Noam Chomsky actually originally what kind of established him in the academic world was when he was coming up, there was a lot of support around this sort of notion that everyone's just like clay and you get molded into what you are based on your circumstances. And he made an argument that, that makes sense in some ways, but that's also not really rational. Like if you were born completely open to imprint, how do you even like absorb language? Like there has to be something there within you that understands there's a pattern of sounds. These sounds get identified with different objects and experiences. There's a written pairing with those noises. Like there has to be something that like assembles this like pattern. Otherwise, it would just always be like kind of jumbled chaos of random noises that you don't understand. But the thing that is like I don't have any experience, just suddenly knowing another language, but I do find that like whenever I have been in states that I consider to be like my most psychopathic states, my ability to mimic people goes through the roof. It's
Yes.
terrifying. It is I mean, I can whip out impressions like it's nothing. Cross culture, I can go from like, Obama to the Joker to just like jumping around. And I don't really, it is this sort of like state like musicians where I don't really feel like I'm doing it. I feel like I've gotten out of the way and somehow my body just knows how to sound like John Lennon. And if I try to do it like right now, couldn't do it at all. I spent like hours like listening to John Lennon trying to mimic him consciously and I can't. But when I'm in one of those states, it's just like it blows my mind.
That's really interesting. But I agree with you. Yes, that there seems to be some connection, as we talked about earlier. My idea about the veil is really kind of our, as some writers, religious writers have said, our mortal coil, which is like
Um,
our we just can't get out of ourselves enough to see kind of other things that happen to be, because we're just so flooded with things that are happening to us. But if we can somehow have that out of body experience, where we're no longer flooded with all of this stimuli, then it does seem like, if we get out of the way, sometimes get ourselves out of the way of certain things, I do think that we are able to tap into like weird things. And I think that is what probably inspires Lydia so much. But I think what ends up happening is, I think it's a big step because I think they talk about some of her initial, she's a prodigy, this, and she has various degrees from whatever. But when she gets her PhD and she goes with the Shipibo people, that is like she's 5 years away from the classical music world, right?
Oh yeah. Okay.
From the movie, right? She
Yes,
decides to
yes.
take, like, basically a 5-year break to kind of go
Yeah.
on this crazy deep dive that seems to have nothing to do with anything else, seems to, and I think she kind of, gets some of her fundamental beliefs, and I heard, like, an interview with Kate Blanchett where people are like, "Do you think that she changed at the end?" And she says, "Well, probably not, because even when she's conducting that last group, she starts with her same kind of one-liners, like, 'What
Yeah.
do you think is the intention of the conductor here?'" But I actually think that those one-liners, those parts are, probably most true to her actual beliefs. Like she's gotten so fluent at kind of, as I kind of used the word and said it before, mutilating herself to kind of fit the idea of what needs to happen. So they do reference this, that the Berlin Philharmonic doesn't work the same as like the American orchestras. They have like different kind of labor laws and different other things, and they have different ways in which the conductor's really not in control because the orchestra retains control over a lot of
Yeah, they
things,
have
and
that
they
like
have to vote,
caucus.
yeah, on these various things. So in order for her to kind of like fill that role, she had to be a diplomat in a lot of ways, a politician, and I think often, unfortunately, it probably involved her kind of curbing her vision or manipulating people or like pretending to be one thing to one, some people and something else to another. Because when she kind of during her fall from grace, she starts speaking her truth a lot more, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You hear her start saying her true opinion about stuff kind of for the first time. Whereas even in her marriage, even with her child, even like with some of her closest relationships, she doesn't actually say the thing that she's thinking. She doesn't appear to have any experience of actually ever being herself, which is kind of like my kind of general theory is, if you do this too much, if you mask yourself too much, you don't have enough expression of your identity, you're mutilating yourself too much, you're too much out of your body, you're too divorced from your identity, from your true preferences, that's not a sustainable way to be, and that eventually you'll find it to be so kind of oppressive, the world that you've built for yourself, but it's not for yourself, it's for a version of yourself you don't even want to be.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
you and you don't even want to be, that this is when the self-destruction happens. This is when the impulses to self-destruct and the kind of like fuck it attitude happens, where you've been white knuckling so hard in this role that you've kind of like chosen for yourself, sure, but only just to get something else, to get something else that you thought you wanted. But you eventually, you it's not worth it to you anymore. And so these self-destructive impulses come and you intentionally burn everything to the ground, even though it kind of looks bad. And so when I sat there cringing, it was because I was like, okay, this has happened to me many times.
yes.
This cycle of boom and bust where I'm like, oh, sure, starting a new education program or a new career or a new relationship or whatever. And I talk about it in the book where like every 3 years, it would all come like crashing down. And when I was younger, I'd just be like, all right, now I'm going to graduate school. now
Yeah,
I'm going, now I'm going into a new career. Now I'm moving cities. Now I can mix it up this way or that way. And so I was always able to kind of run from it. And you see that a little bit with the way that she's moved, but she's been in Berlin for a long time. And the pandemic, and just kind of like all this pretending that she had to do in order to get funding for different people, and she had to kiss the asses of people she didn't respect because they happen to have money, and just like all these things that she was expected to do. In some ways, I see it as like a very psychopathic self-destruction cycle. It probably explains what's happening there the best. I don't think so I saw this review that was like, she's just a bad person who grooms people, and it was written by a woman, she's called her a frigid bitch.
oh
Frigid
wow.
bitch, I know, it's even worse than the conducting student calling her a
Yeah,
fucking bitch, like,
yeah,
so anti-woman, and that's one thing
yeah.
that I noticed
Especially
is that. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say frigid. Like that is such like
Frigid.
a yeah.
And there's no indication that she's frigid. So, like, where are you even getting that from? It's almost like you're just shaming her for being a woman and wanting things. So, I had a
Yeah.
friend who was like, she said it was like pretty incredible to see the New Yorker interview that she does, because she said she's never seen a woman portrayed that way, where she's confident to the point of hubris. And then her significant other was like, "Yeah, this is who works in Hollywood."
Yeah.
Said, "This is just cheating because all they did is take a man's role and cast a woman." And my friend, like, they were fighting about, they got in a fight because it's like, are you trying to say that women can't have, like this this
Yeah.
level of
Yeah.
confidence? So there does seem to be some kind of women hating aspects to the way people react that I think is kind of funny. But that's another psychopathic trait where, that's kind of what I told her is like, to the extent she does show some psychopath traits, not full, maybe 6 out of 10 or whatever, but that she wouldn't be socialized as a woman, that she wouldn't kind of have felt like she had to, because that's what my friend said, is that most women would feel like they have to kind of apologize for their success in
Yeah.
a way, show humility in order to not come off as a frigid bitch, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I do love that phrase she talks where she's in class and she refers to herself as a U-Haul lesbian.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but there is like, yeah, I found myself very triggered by the movie because early on I saw very quickly like this is someone who is like pulling strings. She's performing and she's often quick and dismissive to various people in her life. Which that triggered me because I was like, "Oh no, that's gonna come back to bite you." I see the people being resentful, or you keep them waiting, or you don't answer Sharon's calls. Her
Mhm.
assistant Francesca. They obviously have a very complicated relationship. Um, but then I also saw like how fake she was for other people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like I feel like that's something for psychopathic individuals that's brutal, but also most people can't appreciate is like
Right.
how much we suffer from masking. We and I guess I'll speak for myself. Like there are so many experiences. I was literally just in my head the other day trying to rehearse what to say in these moments where I really want something to go a certain way, or usually I just want something to happen, and everyone is kind of putting the brakes on it because there's some hesitancy, some anxiety. I'm changing things too quickly, and my immediate instinct is to just steamroll over them, which is something I've done in the past and no longer want to do because it's really cold, it's really mean. I get super angry quick and just act like an asshole, and whatever I want ends up blowing up in the end.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, when you are not experiencing emotionally what other people are, it is very hard to be patient and to work with them. I mean, it's just so foreign to you. You don't know what it is. And I think it's hard for people who are so emotionally connected and so in need of, validation and like close relationships that they can't appreciate the level of insanity you will experience trying to dance in that world when you are not connected to it at all. And I see
Yes.
her like suffering so much in a way. And oh God, like the moments I see when she starts like when she's really dismissive to people, or she starts like that moment with I think his name's Francis. He's like the other like assistant orchestra. He's the one that she tries to rotate out. Um,
Sebastian?
oh, Sebastian, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, like the way that she has that scene with him in the office.
Mhm.
And the way she like sets it up is like just consider it, and then he like confronts her, and then she like totally like gaslights him on it.
Mhm.
That was one of those scenes where like I was like, oh my God, there's just like there's so much going on here that like I relate to, and also is like triggering me because I see it as toxic. I also just see it as like gonna cause so many consequences later. Um, or like, oh, whenever Francesca's like upset over Krista's death and the way like she's immediately just like just goes right to just make sure you delete those emails. Like Francesca's falling apart and she's just like, it's okay. She wasn't one of us. Just delete the emails. We're all good, right? Okay, sport. Uh
Yeah. Yeah, you know, like, Arya and I have a phrase we, called chicken people, and it's just when people are behaving in their most kind of emotional, needy, but kind of like needing reassurance type ways, and you see it most commonly when people are boarding an airplane. Where
Oh,
people are kinda like, "Is this my row?" You know, just the weird conversations and
yes.
the, "Is this gonna fit?" And just like, they're probably nervous to be flying and that they're whatever, but they're just so kind of like raw neediness in that moment and just kind of awkwardness, and it's just like, okay, you're like, okay, can we please all find our seats and sit down?" Like, it's hard to have patience with it. You know, if I could never be a flight attendant, probably for this reason, because to be around people where that's usually how they're showing up to the airport in their chicken states, you know, is
Yeah.
like a tricky thing. And it's not, I don't mean to be demeaning. You know, everybody has like their ups and downs. Certainly it's very difficult. And my friends have told me this to be around me when I'm very cold, you know, ice cold states that can be equally bad, and, you know, I understand it. It's because it's like I suck, like, all the joy out of everything in those
Yeah.
moments, right? So, yeah, sure, of course, you know, like, I get it, but
Well, do
to
you
be
find that,
around
like oh, what were you gonna say?
well, to be around that kind of those people and to not have any other outlet or like any ability to just be like, hey, let's be real. You know, can we just put these things aside? But they are being real. That's the problem. Like if you kind of get too caught up in masking all the time, sometimes I think psychopaths believe that everybody is masking. And so then they'll be
Yeah.
like, let's cut the shit. Okay, we all think this, right? And no, they don't
No.
think that. They don't
Yeah.
think that nobody else is pretending but you know? So, like, it can create problems.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely relate to that, and I've also found, I don't know if you've experienced this, whenever I've been in situations where people are getting, yeah, more emotionally needy and clingy, uh, it definitely, like, triggers me to be, like, even more callous, which then triggers them to be even more clingy, and, I mean, it just evolves into, like, such a mess of a situation,
Yeah. Yeah, if
and
they yeah, I think I write about it in the book too. I say, if somebody starts crying or whatever, that's almost an immediate trigger for me. Used to be,
oh,
where
yeah.
I'd be like, "Ugh,
Yeah,
I've
I used to
already held your
immediately
hand, you know, used
yeah.
kid gloves with you this entire time, and now you're crying?"
Yeah, yeah, that shit, yeah. Crying used to just piss me off so much. When as soon as someone started crying, it's just like, "What the fuck are you doing?" But I've gotten a lot better with that. Although I was talking to my therapist the other day about how I, um, went on this walk with a girl I met recently, and I told him how at the end of it, I felt, anger and almost disgust rise up because as she was walking away and as we were saying goodbye, I could tell how excited she was
Mm,
about like us having and same whenever she first like greeted me, like how excited she was to see me. And then how excited she was that I guess that she felt like it went well. We were gonna see each other again. And I immediately felt despised for that because I was like, son of a bitch, you're gonna want something from me now. You have an expectation of what I'm gonna be like. You're creating an idea of who you think I am in my head. And I've tried to be honest throughout our time hanging out today, but I also did not mention and hid like a ton of myself out of, I mean, I guess ultimately it comes down to fear, but I don't experience it in an anxious way. I experience it sort of in this like calculated, like, well, I know I'm not going to be able to say any of this shit to you, or it's just going to completely fall apart. Uh,
mm,
so I'm trying to work on, yeah, disentangling some of that stuff. Uh, but
yeah.
yeah, I mean, there is an odd, I do find that like whenever I have behaved in sort of an unmasked or just unintentionally kind of showed my psychopathic characteristics, people, get really shocked by it. They're horrified, they're disturbed, they lash out. And I do find some irony there at how, like, when you show very little empathy, people will criticize you for it in a manner that shows you no empathy. Like,
Yes,
they will just
exactly.
lay into you. I mean, there's been times where I've tried to open up to people about how little tragic events bother me, or how I'll have these passing thoughts in my head of just like, disturbed things I could do to people. And they'll go right to shaming me, just
Yeah.
and that's horrible. How could you ever think that? That's disgusting. What's wrong with you? And I'm like, well, damn, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, this is how you're handling that? Like, you're not helping to bring me into whatever it is that makes you guys feel sad whenever you hear about a mass shooting. Like,
Right.
just because I don't
Exactly.
give a shit, like I would like to know why you guys do, or maybe even experience that. But you attacking me as soon as I open up about that definitely is not helping.
Yeah, that is the kind of hard thing because, yeah, so I think masking, everybody masks to a certain extent, right? Like at the grocery store, somebody asks you how you're doing. Even if you're having a bad day, it's like, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Oh
Whatever,
yeah.
sure. But if you're masking like a lot all the time and you don't ever kind of get this release, I just think it's so unsustainable. And I think it just like kills your soul. Like even if you're not aware that you have a soul, because a lot of psychopaths
Yeah.
aren't, like
Yes.
it's killing you slowly inside and you're going to start acting out or whatever about it. And so that's kind of the bad side about it on the psychopath side. The bad side it with the normal people is they're always like, I can't trust psychopaths that they're telling the truth. They're always pretending to be something else, that they're not. Well, do you allow them to be themselves? Like, is that their
Oh
choice?
yeah.
Like, yeah, if you just allowed them to be themselves, they would, for the most part. Like they're not manipulating you for the most part to get what they want. They're most of the manipulation, most of the masking is to avoid your repulsion and your social consequences that you then try to impose on them via the shaming and whatever else. Like how many times, like you can look at the reviews of my book on Amazon to see this in action where people are like, all I did was say I have this mental health disorder that manifests in the usual ways, whatever. And people are being like, no, horrible person, or, like just whatever, where they don't want me to kind of even exist. And that's hard because since I do exist, I can't stop existing, and so, in my life, what I have typically chosen to do is just pretend I don't exist that way, for that's the palatable solution or whatever. But then, like Lydia Tar, I've had so many self-destructive episodes where I've just burned everything to the ground because I'm like, why am I living half of a life just for the comfort of others? Why am
Yeah.
I living like less than my full truth just because some people find it distasteful? And I did realize after a while that it does hurt me and I don't like it and I would rather just live my own truth. And that it probably, and it's turned out to be more stable for me and more stable for my friends and family. But I just think it's so sad that people's immediate reactions are not like, you can say like I'm an alcoholic and I think that I killed somebody last night, and you'll get more sympathy than
Yes,
saying
yes.
you're a psychopath.
Yes. Yeah, it blows my mind over the years when I've watched people or noticed people like admit something far worse than something I've done, or like they just behave in ways that are like emotionally endearing to others. They show like a vulnerability or a need to be approved, and they just get away with murder. But if I slip up on some mild social niceties, because it doesn't even occur to me, holy shit, the witch trial comes down on my ass.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Like, what did I really do in the book? I failed at killing a baby opossum. I failed at making a love triangle. I failed at getting somebody fired.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I'm a terrible human being that like can't be trusted around, whoever, anybody. So
yeah. Yeah, the issue of like, there's also such a toxic like notion of irredeemable. Um, that I mean, I feel like our culture, being American, coming from like puritanical roots, like still is carrying so much of this like, you are either good or you are evil, you are a sinner, you are foul, you are vile. Um, and yeah, we have such this like kill it with fire mentality of like we will root out the witch and then we'll burn them.
mhm.
And yeah, I don't know. It's it's quite troubling, it's quite frustrating. I definitely have like I've struggled a lot with, and I'm trying to work, I guess I've just trying to been working on overall like trying to be more connected to emotions, which is really hard for me. I get like blips of it, but then I lose it. And then when I lose it, I tend to like spiral more than I ever have because like I've kind of felt something or experienced something I never had before. And then so losing it just kind of feels devastating because I have no idea how to get it back. Um, but also just trying to work on like finding ways to communicate and engage with people that draws out their empathy for, I mean, well, actually, we want to talk about grooming. I feel like I may be in a moment of my life where I'm studying benevolent grooming,
Mm,
um, where I am trying to find ways to intentionally, like I am intentionally and calculating how can I talk to different people, what can I ask them about, what can I engage with them over that will draw out a more compassionate, empathetic side from them, so I can open up about more of my psychopathic qualities and not have everything just completely go to shit.
yeah.
Um, but I mean, it is still like, calculated and uh analytical, intentional. It takes on those qualities of, I mean, that's kind of where I get interested in like words like grooming has such massive negative qualities.
Yes.
I mean, it is like, that is like a word you should avoid like the plague. Um
I
because
shouldn't be saying I'm a groomer and then
oh
posting it online.
yeah, I know. As soon as you said that, I was like, oh wow, this is a start. uh but it like it is for, and I mean, I feel like it for myself because that kind of notion of poking people, prodding them, hitting their buttons, observing them, watching their patterns, like it really does, like, yeah, it fucks with people a lot. It really puts them on edge. And their like spidey senses go up for, they start looking for threats anywhere. I mean, even if you're doing it in like little ways,
Mhm.
or really unharmful ways, like the fear that you could use that to, really hurt them just like becomes so overwhelming that relationships break down rapidly. Um,
Yeah. So can I like give my own take on this? Like what is my own experience the best kind of thing?
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like the one positive thing about Lydia's ending is I hope that this is what she kind of goes towards, is that this whole time she kind of has been advocating for herself and her right to be herself, right? You hear it in some of the comments she makes about, can we separate the person from the art? In some
Yeah.
of these little debates that happen, or when she kind of like tells the Juilliard, bosses the Juilliard conductor, the student, I think partly it's kind of saying like, would you judge me, and just ignore my entire my body of work because based on personal failings of me. And I think she knows that he would, so it's a very antagonistic kind of stance to take, which is that I reject Bach for having 20 kids. And I'm also going to reject you if you, do things that I don't like. I'm just going to kind of completely disregard you and everything that you are as a musician, everything that you've accomplished, if I just personally kind of don't like you, if you're not like palatable to me. I think that can come off as really aggressive to people like us, because it's like, well, I better, keep in line. Otherwise, this is this is what I'm going to be confronted with all the time, is people kind of not giving me my due based on who I am as a person, because they're intentionally kind of trying to swing the other way, negative, right? They're intentionally kind of being like, "Oh, we'll never, you'll never work again," or whatever, you know. So I think the fact she does survive, and maybe she is kind of, traumatized probably by the whole experience a little bit. I certainly was when
Oh
I
yeah.
like lost my career as a law professor. I was traumatized solidly for like a year or two, and you kind of mentioned some of the scenes that suggest that she is, right?
Oh
Like the
yeah.
waterfall scene.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was so interesting the way she like just sits back like underneath in this darkness, kind of just watching these two kids play, but like
Mhm.
teenagers.
Yeah.
And yeah, she is just she's just like so, I don't know, you see her like lost and like wandering. And I also think it's really interesting too, she has these accusations of like grooming and this, supposed relationship with Krista and Krista's suicide. But then also when she goes into that like bathhouse, that massage place, and she's like confronted with directly just choosing someone, um, it like horrifies her. She runs
Right.
out, throws up in the street. Um, and yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah, it's like, and even like there's an interesting thing too with like myself and my own journey, but it seems to like happen with anybody when they are living a life that is unsustainable. Especially, it seems like some people, well, I don't know if it's lucky or not, but they some people sort of start to disarm an unsustainable life. Some people, the bomb just blows up, um, and you got to figure it out. But there is an interesting, like, returning to home and returning to childhood that seems to emerge in all those experiences. Um, that I don't know. It is a thing of like your childhood. You get set on this path of like socialization. Your upbringing kind of drives you towards certain life choices, and hopefully, if you have a healthy upbringing, you're kind of raised to ha- have different habits that like help lead a sustainable life. You're also like taught that like you can mess up and try again, you can change courses, but whenever you've gotten like locked down this one intense path, uh, you have to sort of just go back to the roots and kind of like reparent yourself.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, honestly, I think you mentioned this maybe in I don't know if it was on the Discord, but I think the ending really is interesting in how like the timing of the ending, like the way time flows towards the end. Um, because I remember the first time watching it, kind of being disoriented, and even the second time around, still feeling this disorientation of like how quickly things were unfolding, how much time was passing between events. Her like spiral really, if anyone spirals into instability and madness or whatever it is, they are obviously losing any capacity to organize their thoughts, their feelings. And you really kind of experience that because like shit just starts falling apart at the end.
Hmm.
And then the scene with the actual like symphony or the orchestra or whatever. Oh my god, that was I love that scene so much. It's such but it was so like and I love how she's like getting herself all like neatly making checking her jacket and everything like right beforehand, and then she walks out and just whoa.
Yeah, you're kind of like, how is she in the wings? They've already started, so who's conducting this?
Yes,
And then
yes.
like,
She was hiding in the bathroom. Uh
yes.
oh my god. But well, it's also, I think there's a moment towards the end, the scene in the river and the scene in the waterfall have this interesting contrast because at first she kind of expresses this like playful thing of like maybe we should stop and have a swim. And
Mhm.
then this like teenage boy is like, no, there's crocodiles. And she's sort of just like, oh, okay. But then when they finally get to the waterfall, she does just like hide away in this dark cove while, they play about and splash. And
Yeah, it
I
makes
don't
you
know.
wonder if she really wanted to swim at all, or if she just wanted to suggest that as like a playfulness. So that's the thing that I kind of worry about for her. My hope for her is that she just starts over and she just is herself, and
Yes.
that she remains herself despite what everybody's trying to do, like burn her at the stake, that she actually this time around just stays true to herself, and she stops masking, and she stops, playing politics, and she just, follows her like true whatever passion and vision, which seems to be channeling, seems to be like that
Yeah.
is a strong belief that she has. And she spent so much time kind of developing that. But I worry that when she kind of talks to people here and there, it's still like a little bit of masking. I worry that she'll have to go through at least one more self-destruction cycle to kind of realize the pattern a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because she does live in this world of music. And I think that I'm a little bit generous of the foibles of musicians in general because I am kind of you can separate the art from the people, especially since I don't know anything about Bach pretty much except that he was Kapellmeister and that he had 20 kids and some of his
Yeah.
kids were also musicians. Like, what is there to judge about that, And so it's
Yeah.
it's really easy for me to just love his music without knowing hardly anything about him as a person. And it kind of strikes me as odd that we have a different standard for people just because they happen to be our contemporaries. And just because we live in a world in which it's so easy to find out so much about anybody, why would we, why would we choose to prioritize that above what we traditionally have kind of prioritized with people in art? I don't understand that very well. Maybe people will have thoughts in the comments, etc about how I am wrong or you trying to explain to me. But yeah, I do hope that she just is herself. And it was kind of funny. And this, I think it was so haunting for like a lot of reasons, but personally triggering to me because like after kind of like being told, no, you can't be a law professor as a psychopath, I was kind of like, I don't see it or whatever. So I fought it for a while. But then after a while, you just kind of like, this is just how people are, they will not accept
Yeah.
me in this way. And so I'll just try something different. But I am very kind of cheat me to my face about it.
Oh,
It's
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Have we talked about this?
I'm not sure. I don't know. But just you saying that, like, I'm like, "Yep, I like that idea." Cheat me to my face.
Yes. Yes. So I really think it's kind of it's the only kind of way you can be in my own personal experience, instead of masking. You know that people are going to be bum to you, but you insist on, like being yourself anyways and forcing them to be bum to you, forcing you to make that choice, making them actually make that choice. So it comes from Wynton Marsalis, the trumpet player, right? And he has a bunch of siblings, musical family. Uh, he was asked, and this is available on his Facebook post, like an old Facebook post. He was asked if he would play at the inauguration of President Trump in 2016, right? And he said, sure, I don't have any opinions about him. He's never been president, so he doesn't have a track record that anyone can point to of good or bad. So he said, I'll just like give him a chance or whatever. And then he said, a lot of people, like voting is the way that you kind of show up. And if you're like boycotting an inauguration, that's fine. But really voting is the way that you could have tried to prevent this or going through the mechanisms of voting. Then he tells a story about his great uncle who in the segregated South would show up to vote every year and they turn him away. And finally, after
Oh,
like years of this, one of the pollsters said, why do you keep showing up to vote? You know that we're just going to turn you away, right? Or maybe it was, Wynton asked this, like, hey, why did you keep showing up? And then when the uncle says to Wynton, make people cheat you to your face, son. Like make them if they want to be ugly
yeah.
to you, if they want to have an ugly belief and act in an ugly way to you, then make them do it. Make them confront the fact that that's their belief. Make them confront the fact that that's their choice, even if they are the identity of being instead of the identity of action. Make them act and make them
Yeah.
like realize, no, this is you. This is what you have chosen to do. I'm just being me. I didn't do anything to harm you. You're the one that's chosen to be ugly. You're the one that's chosen to, judge me, that chosen to persecute me for whatever reason, chosen to act with repulsion to think something that's just a normal, human variant. So I do hope that I
I think
think is
that's
the
so
answer.
badass, by the way. I love that. I
Yeah.
respect that so much. To my core, I'm just like, hell yeah, that man is amazing.
Yes, yes, yes. Good for him. And it really makes you want to be like, yep, I will do that too. Because you don't have to be antagonistic with people. Just being yourself often is like triggering enough for the people who want to be triggered by it, right? So yeah, I do think that people got triggered by the character of Lydia Tar, the woman that called her a frigid bitch.
Yeah.
That's like, whoa.
Oof, that sounds
Like,
so internalized.
yeah,
Like
you wonder
internalized
what's
misogyny, like
yeah, you wonder, but I think that's what I was so happy about with this movie in general is that it provoked. It
yes.
definitely provoked. It was definitely kind of I'm going to be the way that I am and you can have your own reactions, but that says more about you than it says about me.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I really love that about the film. And I
Yeah.
also like hope the same thing, but I also am afraid that like she will probably have to go through another chaos cycle before she is
Yeah.
herself. And really the scene that like one thing the way she like talked to the performers um when she was in, I guess, do you know what country she ended up in at
I
the
think it was kind of like an unknown Southeast Asia. I got the impression it
Okay.
kind of seemed Thai because she says, "I want a massage," and you kind of see like
Oh,
these
yes.
people all set
Okay.
up as if they're sex workers.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Well, I thought it was interesting. I think it was after that scene where I was like, "Oh no, she's still got the bad habits." She's like walking out of, I think it's the hotel, past all these rooms where you can see like house cleaners, and she just has this look of someone who like, I'm going to wear the face I've worn before of like this fearless woman who challenges the world and just moves her own way. Like she walks with this intensity
Mm,
and this like very kind of intense, almost like stoicism to her face that
yeah.
just seems like it seems like someone who got really rattled and is trying to like put back on this kind of tough face rather
Yeah.
than fully embrace like how vulnerable they feel.
Exactly, exactly. And now kind of thinking about that, like you do see her like in the park, she hears a woman screaming and she kind of gets in these negative situations where she's chasing after Olga and she's like suddenly in that, house with a dog, where she really is in physical peril. And I think
Yeah.
she, as all women realize, is there's always more of a threat to women, like you
Yeah.
cannot
Yeah.
physically overpower most men, but most men physically overpower you. It's just kind of the reality of it. And then like add testosterone there where, people are more aggressive as a result
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
testosterone. Kind of that's just like hormonally everything. Like, this, and I'll repeat it just really quickly, just because I keep trying to preach this doctrine. If you take statistically, like totally dirty statistics, but at least it works out if you kind of like, cherry pick the right numbers. If you take somebody who's non-gendered and then make them a male, they're more likely to be a criminal than if you take somebody who's non-gendered and you make them a psychopath.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
maleness is
Yeah,
more
maleness is way
criminal
more. Yeah.
associated with criminality than psychopathy is. And we're
Well,
just
and
used to dealing with men, but, she's used to dealing with it in this way in which she pretends she's not vulnerable. And whenever you kind of live in a world that's not grounded in reality, I just think that's a very precarious, unsustainable thing.
yeah. Yeah, it like really sets yourself up.
But
And
I actually agree, or I maybe agree or disagree with you. The U-Haul lesbian, that was kind of one of the weirdest things is when she kind of described herself that way. I almost wondered if that was like also kind of like a mask, because she didn't
oh,
seem like
yes.
a U-Haul lesbian.
Yes, yes. True. Maybe that was like the closest thing. I mean, that, I wonder if that, yeah, like you're saying, like she, when coming of age, like found that was the closest sort of mask she could wear to herself.
Yes, that kind of fit and, would kind of give her like leeway, just the right amount of leeway about certain things. But I also think it's interesting when she does that New Yorker interview and the guy interviewing her says, "Oh, you sort of flint at some of these descriptions of you."
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's just because like a lot of psychopaths, I certainly kind of don't associate with things that happen to be true about me. And I wonder if that just seems weird to her, is that people think of her in these ways, and maybe that seems even oppressive to her, especially at that
Yeah.
point, because she's like, I have to live up to all these things, these labels that
Yes.
people are imposing on
Yes.
me.
Well, that's when you kind of like have those moments where you see like, oh fuck, the mask worked and now I have something to maintain. And
Yes.
I don't want to maintain that. I want to be
Yes,
um
like you and the girl in the park.
yes. Yeah, well, I literally had a moment in when I was talking to my therapist about that. I got so close to crying. I got choked up and then I just laughed a lot. Um,
Yeah.
and the which is I think is interesting. I've recently been interested in how emotion how in catharsis, how does like emotion release happen? And I think crying and laughter and like anger, they're interesting. But I was upset because I was telling him like I just don't know how to be. Like every situation I go into, I really have no sense anymore of trying to architect anything. But I am just so used to every day, every fucking moment, constantly having to mask. And I mean, the reality is, do I constantly have to? I mean, that's kind of what I'm trying to unlearn, is how much of this is a have to versus what I've kind of imposed upon myself or learned. But in doing so, yeah, it's just like so infuriating and like deeply upsetting to literally not have any sense of just being. Um, and I feel like, I feel like if I was honest, it's sort of ironic. I've noticed whenever I'm allowed, quote unquote allowed, or in a position or in some interaction with someone where I can like fully unmask and, my voice is like complete monotone, almost like I don't show really any facial expressions. I really don't react to anything. I kind of just describe everything in sort of like these transcript ways. Um, when I have those moments, I then will come alive afterwards. Like
Mm.
the soul is like reborn, and there's this almost like beautiful, like not only charisma that comes out, but this childlike aspect to me, and emotional attunement to others. Like when I am fully able to just like let it out and I don't have to perform, the like authentic, what I consider to be like the authentic self in me, uh, does emerge. And yeah, it's God, I don't know. There was something else I was thinking, but I can't remember. I can't remember exactly what it was. Oh, I guess this is kind of off topic, but somewhat connected to the scene with the student during the lecture. Is I was talking to, yeah, I was talking to my therapist about this, where I, oh shit, okay, I'm having a jumble of thoughts that I want to express. Oh yeah, I guess there was that one thing I wanted to express where I thought it was interesting. Like you bring up how she flinched in the interview and like wondering like does she want to be associated with these things. I have had like such a long-standing one like feeling so, I guess, disconnected or not being able to see myself in anything, that there's just so much that people would point out about me. Anytime people pointed anything out about me, like a pattern they could see in my behavior or a characteristic, I hated that. And I've tried to squirm my way out of so many like descriptions of me, of people being like, oh, how are you gonna deal with going off to college? You're gonna have to live with a roommate, you like being alone all the time. You don't like being around people. And then it's like, no, 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 none of that's true. I don't know why you think any of that at all. Um, Meanwhile, I'm spending all of my time alone in, not ever being around anyone, so there's like, but there's all these things too, where, I mean, there's an irony in it because I also can hyper adapt too. So
Mm.
there's this strange duality. But that kind of in connection to like people who are identity of being, who very much are emotionally attached to certain terms about themselves and ways of describing their identity. I can actually relate to that in some ways because of, I guess, my aversion to being described by anything. But one thing I was talking to my therapist about was, I really value respecting other people, respecting their identity and their right to identify themselves as they want. But when I see people who kind of run through these lists of, I'm a pangender, BIPOC, this and this and that. I want to be referred to by these pronouns. I want you to refer to me in this way. I want to respect that, but part of me also feels like, man, you are degrading yourself.
Mm.
Like if your emotional well-being is like trapped and locked upon other people referring to you by these pronouns or addressing your ethnicity or cultural heritage in this way, or other people not dressing in a certain way that is related to your culture. Like it seems like it degrades the value of your life so much when you are reduced to whether or not someone calls you she, when you want to be referred to as she. Um,
Mm.
and and it's so tricky because I definitely am super, I guess, territorial about aspects of my identity or how I'm engaged with. and I want to respect that with other people. But at the same time, I see a lot of people I know who are consider themselves who identify as, trans or agender, or are kind of going through that finding themselves experience. And I want to validate it, but at the same time, it feels like the identity of being version of like an unsustainable life. Like I kind of see what that looks like for
Yeah.
an identity of action person, where you're just masking to get things done all the time. But
Right.
then when you are like, I don't know what the term would be, if it's a kind of masking or if it's like a decorating or something, but you are trying to establish this thing that you are, and so desperate for everyone to validate it. Otherwise, you just completely like lose your shit and you feel so hurt and rejected. And it just seems like, yeah, it's like I don't know what to do about that. It's, it seems hard, it seems unsustainable. Uh, but even having like conversations like this around this subject, I feel like are so dicey. I mean,
Hmm.
I feel like because you are of, more psychopathic disposition, like we have sort of a disconnection around this. But most people, I was just watching a comedian last night who made a joke about like bringing up how difficult these conversations are, and then immediately was like, see how the whole room just got super tense. I didn't even start talking about it yet. I just talked about the idea of talking about it. But they get so like charged to where
Yeah.
it feels like there has to be some, I don't know. It seems to me knowledge and truth and what is good for people is always something in the middle. It always holds paradox. It always holds nuance. It is neither
Yes.
one side or the other.
Right. I agree. I agree. These like black and white kind of thinkers, I don't think that is probably the answer is that, I even saw this on Twitter the other day where they were like, can you imagine if like the, liberal people could just be alone and we could just keep the reactionaries out who just, they were kind of saying like the reason Twitter works is because there's liberal people there for the reactionaries to come and bother to harass. And they said the
Oh,
reason why
yeah.
like Parlor doesn't work or some of these other options doesn't work, Truth Social or whatever, is because the reactionaries don't want to just talk to each other. They want to try to trigger liberals, right? So you're like, okay, that there's some interesting ideas to that. But then somebody else followed up and was like, imagine though this island of liberals where, after like 5 years into it, comrades, A and comrade B find themselves surprised to be outed as reactionaries and then they're kicked off the
Yeah.
island. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's just kind of like, there's a lot of truth to a lot of things, and it's easy to say things with like certainty and absolutism, and that things that are only anecdotally true, and I think that it's easy, just as we're talking about, like we're just constantly inundated with all the sensations, our bodily sensations, much less anything else that's going on with the world and our hopes and our dreams and our goals and whatever else. There's just we naturally have to just narrow our vision so much, but in the choices that we make in narrowing our vision, I think that we lose some of the complexity, I think, as you kind of have mentioned. But, remind me what were you saying just before this? Sorry, my blood sugars.
Oh no, it's all good.
You said that,
Um
oh, yeah, the people, the believing people, like it's just as unsustainable for them to have so many identities. So a really interesting essayist, Paul Graham, he's kind of I don't know, like now I guess an angel investor or something, venture capitalist guy. But he wrote, like back in 2009, you can find it on his website. It's called Keep Your Identity Small, where he just explores this idea and says, if you like associate so strongly with a baseball team like the New York Yankees, then you can like you make that part of your identity. So if people attack the New York Yankees, you feel like they're attacking you personally. That's
yeah.
basically what he's saying. And like I can see it in my own family. They're BYU fans, football fans, basketball fans,
Mhm.
they love BYU. And then if BYU loses, wow.
Oh god, yes.
Watch out, it's like everybody's angry, and so he's just kind of saying like just be careful what you choose to identify with. It's not like it's wrong to have say this is my identity, like nothing wrong about it. But if you have so many things and those identities are like things that you naturally can't control, you can't control BYU football, you can't control the New York Yankees. They're necessarily not you because they're external to you, right? And so as you kind of adopt labels that may or may not describe exactly who you are, be careful, because when people kind of use those labels in a way that you feel like doesn't describe you, that can feel personally triggering, right? You will take what my therapist
Yeah.
used to call an identity hit because of it, because they've taken something that you said, like Mormon, for instance. I could be like, my identity's Mormon. And then if people, like you said before, most of what you know about Mormon is from like pop culture making fun of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Could be taking identity hits right and left about Mormon, or certainly about psychopath. If I
Oh
wanted to,
yeah.
feel badly about myself, I could be like, I'm psychopath to the core, and then read a bunch of shit about psychopaths. So that's kind of the tension. And I do
Yeah.
agree with you that it's kind of unsustainable in the same way that like a cantilevered, floor of a building, if it can only go so far out from its like root foundation without being unsustainable and collapsing. And that's true about psychopaths too. Everybody masks to a certain point. But if you're constantly masking, if it's constantly always about like the ends justify the means, and all you care about is the outcome over process, and you mutilate yourself, to the nth degree in order to get what you want in the short term, like these things have consequences. It's not there's a point where that becomes unsustainable, right? And I
Yeah.
agree with you about this. Possibly this is what's unsustainable about the identity of being, is that they adopt so many identities, so many labels, that it just becomes, the sheer weight, or the
Well,
sheer size of the target that they're taking identity hits from is just too large. They can't accommodate it.
yeah, that's kind of like the point that a lot of comedians make, but also like criticism is like of the LGBTQ community is like how many like letters have been added on to identify like different gender orientations, sexual orientations, and how it becomes like overwhelming the amount of like terminology you are having to
Yeah.
learn in order
That
to
you
engage.
Yeah, and here's the thing, if somebody finds, like, meaning in one of these letters, certainly, certainly. But if you suddenly force everybody else in the world to, like, learn a
Yes.
set of rules to respect that aspect of your identity, you can't control other people. They're not going to
Yeah.
comply, and if you just, like, hinge all of your happiness and your sense of identity on them complying with that, when the reality is that you don't control other people, and you can't, that just seems like real unsustainable to me. That seems like a fool's errand. But maybe they
Yeah.
have to go through the chaos cycle on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seems like
Well,
people have to
and
learn the hard way sometimes.
it's yeah, yeah, there's definitely everyone's got something they gotta learn the hard way. Like, there's so much shit in my life that I never had to learn the hard way. Other people were struggling with, like, how to, like, save money or something, and I never have a problem with it, but there's a lot of shit that I definitely have had to learn the hard way too that other people, kinda just waltz through, and
Absolutely.
I don't know, I do think it's also interesting, like, kind of getting to that scene with, the BIPOC student, rejecting Bach is, like, I mean, that person is technically related to Bach, maybe
Mhm.
in like an extremely distant way, but all human beings are related to someone each other. And if you look at our family tree, that is just soaked with blood and violence and warfare and horrible things. I mean, across all cultures, all times, you cannot find like a single group of people where there is not massive amounts of all sorts of terrible behavior. And fixating on that and like defining people as either like all good or all bad and then trying to just like purge and exile the bad people is literally what puts you back in cycle with all the horrible things that have been done throughout history.
Right.
And it's really interesting too. I remember reading an article in college about how Asian American had to be invented
Mm.
because when groups of Asian people started immigrating to the US for various reasons. Many of them did not want to be associated with each other at all because, like, you wouldn't refer to these people as Korean or Chinese or Japanese. They would want to be known in terms of the specific region of Korea they came from, the specific towns, the specific class they were a part of, the family lineage. And if you named someone as being the same as them who was maybe even from the same town, they would, I mean, lose their shit because this person might be in a lower class and they don't want to be associated with that at all. But if you looked at those people relative to the white people that controlled the country, there was such this difference that they eventually had to all organize together as Asian American under this one big branch just to advocate for their rights, because to the white people here, we just, it's that sort of like they all look the same. They're all the same sort of stereotype. Um, so I mean, yeah, the divisions, like, they always keep going down further and further. You can't really hide from the fact that people will constantly break up people into different groups, into different tiers of who's better and who's this. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like we are living in such a fascinating era where, because of the internet and the amount of information we have access to, it's like the world is having to go through almost this like historical, like, I don't know,
Reckoning.
reckoning. Yes. I mean, there's no oceans that we can get on and sail to this quote unquote new land. There's no lands to conquer that have not been conquered. Like, everyone is everywhere, and we have so much information on all the shit we've been doing for thousands of years. And there's a lot of reckoning that has to happen with that.
Yeah.
And as much as I very much want to promote that for the last like 500 years, quote unquote, white people, which also, even that term gets really messy. We white people have not included a lot of people who are now considered white in that term. But white people, have been the dominant force on the globe. They've caused a lot of oppression, slavery, warfare. But man, if you go back before those 500 years, white people are, first of all, tearing each other apart left and right, enslaving each other left and right. But there's also massive examples of huge, like, Arabian empires that
Hmm.
involved enslaving Europeans that tried to invade Europe. You have the Mongols trying to invade Europe. You have like groups like the Aztec, who were hated by, like, the only reason the Aztec were brought down is because when the Spaniards showed up, everyone living around the Aztecs hated them. They had been like being traumatized and murdered in mass for years, so they helped the Europeans to bring them down because they were tired of the oppression. Uh,
Hmm.
Also, interesting enough, I didn't know this. The Aztec actually weren't referred to as the Aztec. Their true name at the time was the Mexica. That's where like Mexico comes from, the term. Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, reckoning is always a mess, and we're experiencing that globally now.
Yeah, reckoning. It gets real tricky because it turns out everybody has a glass house. I don't think that people kind of anticipated that when they started throwing stones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we now have been talking almost as long as the movie lasts. Just kidding. But I do
Is
think,
there?
you're speaking one more time about timing. I did love the way that time was an issue, and I partly love the way that time's an issue as a musician because time is the only way in which you can experience music. It is a temporal art form. It can only be experienced in time, and that does get controlled, at least in a live performance, by the conductor or by the musicians playing whatever with time. But I agree with you that it was just so masterful. It reminds me of like the way that time was messed with in this movie reminds me of Vertigo, which when I walked into Vertigo for the first time to see it in like a theater, I just had no expectations, no idea. And I was like so freaked out. I was like, what is happening? I was like, my mind was so blown. I was like, I thought that was going to be the end of the movie. And it kept
Yeah.
going. Yeah,
Well,
so it
that reminds me of like I think you mentioned like being John Malkovich in the
um
Discord. I When I watched that, I had no expectation. It was just on after I got home from school one day, and I was like, okay, I'll see what this is. And like before long, I was like, what the fuck am I watching?
yeah, I love being John Malkovich. The other one I mentioned is Sweet and Low Down in terms of protagonists who try to kind of like they are like the I guess the downfall, the cautionary tale probably made by people who are identity of being about identity of action people. These
Yeah,
identity
yeah,
of action people who are like, I'm just gonna like ride this, to glory or whatever, and then they have such a downfall, but it is like this very Icarus thing where it's like people like you can't go too far. But I mean this is like this idea of non-extremes is like probably a good one. Like you can't mask too much. You can't identify with too much. You can't whatever. So I do think that that there's truth. If you take things to an extreme, then it ends up being bad. But I also kind of think that people, when they take things to extreme of like good and bad people, this person's a bad person. I don't listen to Bach. I don't trust psychopaths. That there's a lot lost there too. So that's one thing that I love about Tar is that I think it's provoking to those who are willing to be provoked. And everybody
Yeah.
who kind of walks away, I honestly judge them a little bit, probably not in like this moral way, but just kind of think, oh, you're kind of more of a black and white thinker.
Yeah.
Like as you say, with the woman who called her a frigid bitch, you're like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
seems like there may be something more about you that's being expressed. Yeah, but people who are kind of like, she's just a terrible person and like she's not likable at all, and the movie was boring or whatever. I'm like, we're just
Well,
very different people, I guess.
yeah, I was like, whenever I hear that, I'm like, did you not see the scenes with her and like Patra? Like,
Yeah.
they have some like very heartwarming moments together. The way she holds her foot, the way,
Yeah,
she
the
like plays
daughter.
with her, the way she like
Hmm.
sticks up to, literally goes after her bully, which I would not recommend is the mature way to deal with a child bully.
You
Um,
know, it was funny, Arya too was like, "Oh, she's gonna get in trouble for this," but I was kinda like, "No, she did it really masterfully." She said,
yeah,
like, "If you try to tell anybody, I will just say
no,
no, and they won't believe you."
yeah,
So she
yeah,
gaslights her
exactly.
really successfully.
Oh
Or
yeah,
not even gaslights her, I think just tells her what's up,
yeah.
and who else would know so much about manipulating and knowing bad consequences than Lydia?
Oh, for
She
real.
yeah, she's played this game forever, to her detriment.
Well, I really love that scene too, where like Sharon is like confronting her, and Sharon openly admits, like, look, we plotted together. Like, we
Yeah.
conspired on how to get into this orchestra, how to play the games, all the whispers. I think that's so, and in those like various like shots that happen where like you see this like collage of like blurred images of different people whispering each other's ear, and it's all in like darkness.
Mhm.
Like there's these like dream sequences that'll get like thrown in there every now and then. I thought
Yeah.
that was like very provoking, intriguing, fascinating.
Yeah, and there's one other thing that this is just triggered in my memory that I loved so much about this because as someone who like loves jazz and classical, art music, I love the incorporation of jazz in this and so kind of clever. So there's like three very prominent jazz songs. One is Little Darlin', and it's when she comes back from the her first trip and the wife is having like a panic
Oh,
attack, but she's
yes,
stolen her
yes,
meds.
yes, yes.
So
I
she
didn't notice
chooses
that
it.
until the second time I watched it, that she had actually had stolen them, and was like, "Oh, yeah, it
Oh,
was just loose in the drawer."
yeah. Uh-huh, very tricky. So she chooses Little Darling because it's like a chill, like beats per minute. I think Sharon says it's not quite 60, it's like 66 or something. And
Yeah.
I don't think it has any words, but it is kind of, it's titled Little Darling. It's very sweet. And it's like kind of the sweet moment between two wives. But I guess you end up questioning like, was it really sweet ever from Lydia's perspective, or was she always just masking even then? But then
Oh, yeah.
you hear just a little bit of a clip of every time we say goodbye, I die a little. You know that one? Every time we
Oh,
say
yeah,
goodbye,
yeah.
I wonder why a little. So they played just a little bit of a clip where the lyric goes, how strange the change from major to minor.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So for musicians, like that is true. So they're kind of talking about it like, oh, when we say goodbye, it's like a change from major, which is generally associated with happy, everything's fine, to minor, which is generally associated with like sad, foreboding,
Yes.
etc. So it's interesting that they use that clip. And then the other very prominent time that they're listening to jazz, I think always in the apartment. So it's kind of interesting. I think every time they listen to the jazz, it's in the apartment. And every other time we hear classical music or art music being played. So again, in the apartment, they're playing Here's That Rainy Day. Do you know that one? And they're playing one that doesn't have words. So that was funny too. You'd almost have to know the jazz songs to know like what is the meaning being conveyed. But Here's That Rainy Day, the lyrics kind of go like, uh, something, here's the, man, maybe I'll just like look it up real quick.
Okay,
Well, it's
yeah.
mainly like, here's that rainy day they told me all about, but I laughed at the thought that it might be that way. That's the main lyric. You know?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, suddenly it's a rainy day, and they told me all about it. People warned me, but I laughed, you know? So it's real like, wow, something terrible has happened. Here's that rainy day is like the thing that people warned you about has finally happened to you, and that's where you are. You're in that rainy
Oh,
day.
wow.
Yeah. So
That's
I
that's a
there's so
great
many
addition. I
parts.
didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many parts about the movie that I just really appreciated, like little touches. I hope it sweeps award season, but I worry that she's not a likable enough character, especially since she is a female actress playing this
Yes.
character, and there does seem to be pushback from the average person
Yes.
about that.
Well, that's so wild how, yeah, different other people can experience it, that they're so, like, I mean, I was triggered by the film, obviously, but I was not triggered in that way at all.
Right.
Um, I also, I do think it was interesting too, like that moment where she confronted Petra's bully. She identified herself as Petra's father. Like, you
Yeah.
want to talk about masking and identity and roles and stuff. Um, and the dynamic with Sharon.
And I wondered too, because she goes to kind of see Petra, pick her up from school or whatever, and then gets turned away from Sharon. I wonder if Sharon
Yeah.
is the sole parent on the adoption record, and maybe she was like, "Oh, but of course she's my child too." But
Yeah.
it might just make it easier, with the government officials to just have you be the sole parent. But that kind of like bit her in the ass too. So all these
Yes. Yes.
all these ways that she kind of like, and that's the kind of the problem with orchestrating and like constantly plotting, for the thing that you think is going to lead to happiness is like it does tend to like bite you in the ass because you can't predict, like the world perfectly. Like sometimes psychopaths tend to think, hey, I'm pretty good at predicting, in fact great at predicting, probably is what
Yeah.
most psychopaths think, and like I'm in control and I would never give up control. And it's hard, it's almost like you have to like learn the hard way about that to realize no, you're not in control.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, that literally kinda sums up my last year. Like, I I tried so many different things on, like, my "healing journey," quote, unquote, and they all bit me in the ass so hard. Like, they sent me kinda spiraling into some of my, like, worst experiences where I was like, "This certainly is gonna be, like, my breakthrough," or, "This certainly is gonna be what I need," and man, they all just like, the universe just smacked my ass hard on that. And
Yeah,
I mean, it was kind of a chaos cycle that I needed to go through.
yeah.
Um,
It is kind of a almost like I find there to be like a lot of parallels with like the 12-step programs where it has to be like this realization that you don't control things. Like whether it's a belief in a higher power or belief that, just that nobody controls things, including you or whatever. But yeah, I've noticed I see some stuff sometimes even on the Discord or like people I've talked to, psychopaths, where they're like, "No, I don't need to make a real change. I just needed to make tweaks to this."
okay,
And it
yes, yes.
reminds me. Have you ever heard of epicycles?
Oh, yeah, what is that in relation to?
Yeah, so you're gonna have to help me. So I think it's the Ptolemaic system had the
Oh,
sun
yes.
revolving around the Earth, and that
Okay,
did,
yes.
yeah, that did work with their rudimentary powers of like perception, observation, and their tools for that for a while. And then they started to realize, hey, that doesn't really work because the sun's not going in like this smooth
Ah,
ellipse.
yeah.
Right, what it's actually doing is kinda going in an ellipse, but making, like, little swirls in the
Yeah.
ellipse as it's going along, so they called those swirls epicycles, and that worked. They were like, "That's weird that the sun's doing that, but sure." And then their technology got better, and they found that it's not just one epicycle that would have to, like, the sun would have to be doing, but epicycles within the epicycles. So
Ah,
they had to just keep adding levels of epicycles, and it
yes.
would work, and it would work with the whatever for a while. And probably if you take it to the limit of an infinite number of epicycles, it does accurately predict the sun's movement. But what actually more elegantly,
Yes.
instead of infinite epicycles, explains the sun's movement is just that the Earth revolves around the sun, and that's why we observe those epicycles within epicycles.
Yeah.
Right. So it just kind of this idea that if you kind of like, some people are like, I'm the problem is not that I'm white knuckling. The problem is I'm not white knuckling enough. That's usually the way I see it
Yeah.
manifested. Like
Yeah.
it's not that I'm masking too much. It's that I need to be even crazier about masking. Like I need to be even
Yeah.
more aggressive about prioritizing the needs and impressions and of whatever of other people to the at the expense of my own. Right. And that's where I see it in a very sad way, in a very kind of like Lydia way, where I'm like, I don't agree with this.
Yeah.
but but everybody has to learn their own way about it, about these epicycles, whether you're, you can just keep clamping down even harder on yourself and whether that will work.
Yeah. You know, have you I recently was watching a video that I'll send to you because I also want to send you that book about like the
Oh yeah,
ayahuasca
absolutely.
ceremonies. But it was about, it kind of made me think of where the psychopath exists across cultures through archetypes and mythology. And I was watching this video analyzing the psychology of the trickster,
Mm,
like this figure of of the trickster that appears in pretty much all cultures mythology. And it was
like
interesting to
Loki.
me. Yes, exactly, like Loki, or god, there's one,
Huh.
Anansi the spider.
Mm,
um there's also figures that appear in various like Native American folklore, web spinners and stuff. And it really seemed like when I was like watching, I was like, wow, this just sounds like the mythology version of psychopath. Like, in writing about it, it's like the trickster begins as immature, cold, and cynical, childish, trapped in this kind of cycle of deception and toying with people, but without any real meaning, just
yes.
traveling from one place to another without any connection, any home. They're unfeeling and I was like, wow, this is really, this is really hitting a lot of the one. but but I was interested to keep watching because they were also talking about like how the trickster evolves and becomes enlightened, how they mature.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yes, and like how does I seem to be on this line of like different archetypes have their own hero's journey, and what is the hero's journey for that type to truly kind of achieve a life that is worth living, as well as like come in balance with just the powers that be. But yeah, it really caught my eye. I was like, this might give me some good tips.
Yes. Oh, good. Maybe we'll follow up with a third video about these tricksters once we both look into it.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Do we have anything else to say about Tar?
Um, I guess I was interested in your take on her relationship with Olga.
Oh, yeah. The Olga thing is interesting because I think it's kind of like the moment where she goes to the masseuse, massage parlor, and she kind of realizes, like she's degrading herself. There's something about, but I understand when you're white knuckling, it's like these whatever, Christian gay ministers,
Oh
you know,
yes,
who
yes,
who
yeah,
who kind of like you're white knuckling so hard in one area, and it's like things have to kind of, something has to give, I think is like the law of the universe.
yeah,
Right? So I feel like with her, and it's got kind of self-destructive, but I think she thinks she's clamping down so hard and she's so stuck in this life that this idea of Olga is just kind of like, a release like the other people, but Olga is so clearly is not interested, and Olga has like basically zero of the same philosophies, values,
yeah, yeah,
aspirations. Like Lydia is saying things like, "Oh, what album did you hear that from?" And that's a totally snobby music snob, classical music snob thing. Is like, what album, what conductor, what orchestra, what year.
yeah. What
Like if you
canon
don't
are
know
you coming
those,
from?
then
Yeah,
yeah, then you're an idiot.
yeah,
Right? Like
yeah.
it's
You have,
yeah, especially in certain parts, especially certain kind of disciplines or instruments. It's like they are like audiophiles. They know every recording, they know
yeah.
every kind of whatever that you could. So when she says YouTube, it's like it's like
Oh,
a rejection of all this like stuffiness that Lydia has had to submit herself to, all of her career, despite being coming from this blue collar Pennsylvania. background.
Yeah.
And she changes her name from Linda to Lydia and adds
Yeah.
obviously an accent to Tar, which
Yes.
otherwise is just a oil derivative.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yes.
Like kind of greasy, suggests that there's a lineage of blue collarness coming. But so Olga, lies to her about where she lives because she doesn't want Lydia to know where she lives. And she goes on this trip to New York and lies and says, I'm going to sleep, I'm jet lagged, but instead goes out on the town with some random
Yeah.
people. So I think it's just kind of like this is what you have kind of like brought yourself to, is like that probably even more than some of the other degradations that she has to face, like having to face, this caucus of the orchestra people as she's removed from her position, face some of these other, even like the scene that you described where she tackles him. She probably in some ways, like the degradation with Olga is worse because it's like this rejection of everything that she kind of stands for. It's not even a rejection about herself. She's already sublimated herself and kind of like mutilated, distorted herself out of kind of the picture.
Yeah.
But it's like you traded yourself, like living your own truth for all, ABC, and ABC is worthless to Olga, right? Like all of that stuff is worthless. Everything that Lydia kind of like, my therapist would say, you shouldn't trade in your own identity. You shouldn't use it, commodify it, use it as a currency. Kind of like, well, if I just give up, 10% of myself, I'll get X thing. And his basic rule was like, never do that. Like your identity is like sacrosanct. It's not to be commodified. It's not to be traded as
Yeah. Don't
like
hedge the bets and
exactly. But that's exactly what Lydia does, is kind of like trades her basically almost an entire identity. And despite that, somebody's kind of like, well, why would you? It would be like buying, like an NFT that suddenly
yeah.
somebody else says, oh, that's worthless. You're an idiot for having made that choice. And I think that too is like in the movie Sweet and Low Down and Being John Malkovich, they too kind of make this mistake of like, hey, we're going to kind of trade our identity and we're going to achieve this great thing that ends up not being as worthwhile as they thought it was going to be. Like people, even the what they thought was going to be the epitome of their kind of art turns out to be, kind of the monkey's paw,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, true.
cursed.
Monkey's
It's
paw,
cursed.
yes.
But I
Yeah.
think that's for all psychopaths. Every time they kind of like try to monkey's paw their life, then there's a curse there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish there
Yeah.
were exceptions. I haven't met them though.
Yeah. And if there are, you just gotta wait a bit longer and you'll see it all coming down.
I know,
It all fall apart.
unfortunately, yes. That kind of I think puts a natural tension between me and some of these other psychopaths kind of that haven't gone through a reckoning about
Oh,
their
yeah.
life choices, is that like I'm like a albatross,
Ah, yes,
like
yes.
this foreboding omen. That's like,
Yeah.
don't take the, but I think the real happy story here is there's plenty of people that I've talked to who have made small choices. They've been soft out of the closet about being a psychopath. They've made like choices to just stop masking, like small adjustments. And they actually seem to be doing great. Like I'll hear from them and they seem like the happiest that they've ever been. So I think especially if you start young, especially, and here's kind of another thing about like it's like a little bit related to cheat me to my face. It's kind of like a take it or leave it thing, is that like honestly, certain people as you come out will just leave you, like certain people
Yeah.
will just choose no. But then there are going to be other people who are going to choose yes, that wouldn't have chosen yes when you were back in your masking state. So it's kind of like you just have to wait for everything to kind of like shake out,
Yeah,
just a
it
few years
settles.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm still kind of in the middle of all that, doing quite a bit of flailing, but also seeing a lot of, like, successes. Because I've started to, like, softly unmask. I've talked to a lot more people in my, like, kind of inner circle about my psychopathic nature and qualities, and Yeah, there's also I found there's a difficulty though where and I think this is part of like letting go of control when you are psychopathic is just so I mean that is like I don't even know if other people can understand how it is like so foreign. It is I mean it's like trying to like run with your eyes closed. Have you ever tried to do that before? This shit is just like
Mm-mm.
your body's just like, no, stop, open your fucking eyes, then we'll move. But I've noticed there's so many situations where like I want to get myself to a point where like I kind of just shake off and burn the brush. Whoever is just going to ditch me, whoever's not going to be there, just let him go. But I find because I have such a hard time connecting to and valuing anything, I almost just, even though I know consciously, like, okay, this person's just leaving because of this, well, they're probably not a good person to have in my life anyway.
Yeah.
Um, the like lost opportunity of being able to orchestrate and perform for them, like, is like kind of devastating. Like, I even though I don't really care about them, there's sort of the sense of like, well, I could become what they want or what they need, or I could become this figure of power and significance to them or could control them in these ways. And I don't consciously think that, but I assume that's like seems to be what is underlying because yeah, letting people just letting the kind of cards fall where they may just becomes so so difficult, so fucking difficult.
Yes. And I think there's probably a lot of reasons, but I wonder if one reason about that is I think that everybody wants like a sense of identity, and self-expression. And I think when we become a particular role for a particular person, so like imagine again, like Lydia becoming the role of wife to Sharon,
Oh
right?
yeah.
There's something about you in that role, and then when you lose that opportunity to perform that role, it is like you're losing that part of you, unless you can find another way to find that same
Yeah.
self-expression.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Yeah, it's like whenever people like retire after having a certain career for decades and they
Yes.
just like don't know what the fuck to do with themselves at all and they massively spiral.
Hmm. Or like
Oh, yes,
widows.
yeah.
Yeah, same thing.
I think with veterans a lot too.
Oh yeah. I mean, it is a loss. It is a loss. And I think you have to kind of go through the process of grieving that loss and then seeing if you can find substitutes for it, or just kind of like reconciling yourself to the fact that you can't.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer, I don't think, there, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like with all the guidance and wisdom and instruction you can get, part of like growing and transforming and achieving a life you want to live and becoming the person you want to be always involves like you have to go through the weeds. Like you have
Yeah.
to be disoriented, confused, lose hope, feel like something's not possible. Like that overcoming that experience is in of itself how you find clarity. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it also
totally
it's oh,
totally agree about that. Go ahead.
I was just gonna add, I mean, it all seems to come back to flow though. Like we are looking for like this sense of flow, and when you have an identity, when you have a job, when you have a role you can play or perform, it just gives you so much more clarity and certainty to exist and to act and to be fulfilled. Whereas if you're left with nothing and you don't know who you are, yeah, people just like man, they spiral, they wallow in their own filth and kind of just decay and
Yeah.
or explode.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kinda like a bicycle. You're most stable on a bicycle when you're moving forward, and the faster the better usually, although there is too fast when it becomes unstable again.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting you said that. I've literally been having that image in my head over the past week, was thinking about like how you can whenever you're running going fast enough on a bicycle, you don't even need to hold the handlebars. Like once you're at a certain level, I think I was actually trying to think about it like that to encourage myself to keep trying to change because I was thinking about it like, okay, you're sort of locked in a certain pattern of behavior right now, and getting over that hump is really hard. But once you get the snowball moving, once you get it in motion, it just carries itself so much more easily. And you open up so many more opportunities.
I totally agree. Yeah, it's like or a snowball, like pushing have you ever had to push a car? My dad used to have, like, junker cars when I was growing up, so we'd have to push a car, and the first, like, inches are terrible, but once it
Yeah.
gets, like, just a little bit of momentum, it's so much easier to push a car.
Yeah, I used to work at a truck wash, and sometimes the trucks would break down in the bay, and we
Mhm.
would all have to get behind it and push it. And of course, there'd be like a few of the guys who were just like fake pushing it and not doing anything. But yeah, once you get it moving, man, once you get the the body in motion, wants to stay in motion.
Yeah, then somebody needs to be in to press the brake because
Yeah, true. Yeah, yeah.
can get pretty dangerous, but yeah, I mean, I hope that, I think it's true what you said about I know that it's hard, like, Arya is still kinda going through things too, you know? And I go through things, but they're smaller things. I guess that's the nice thing is that she just the other day was like, you know, "I just want there to stop being things." Like, if I could just know this was the last thing, then I
Oh
think I
yeah.
could do it. But I
God
just
damn, I've
worry
said that
that
much.
I know, every single time there ends up being another thing, and it's so dispiriting. And so you really have to have such a lion heart about it and just be willing to do it no matter what, because the truth is that there is not really another feasible option, number one. And sometimes that helps, you know, like they say that with soldiers, when you know that there's not a way out, there's no retreat, they fight
Yeah,
better, you know, they fight
yeah,
harder, they do things that they didn't think that they could. And I think that's true of all of us is that we can do things, we can all do hard things and that is like it's very hard and I so hesitate to say that and as I'm saying it I even like feel emotional just remembering my own hard things and how hard it was to go through those things for me and how almost unfair it seems for me to say that to somebody else that you can do a hard thing and that you have to do a hard thing unfortunately
yeah,
I think in this situation because I just don't know any other way to do it but that as much as it may seem like you can't, like you can. Everybody that I've known has been able to keep going. You know, just
yeah,
like the fish in Nemo, just keep swimming. And it's
yeah,
weird. Like I often think about these like running backs in American football, how the ones that just keep their feet moving, like they can keep going. Like they got like three guys hanging off them, and they
yeah,
just keep their feet moving though, and they just keep moving forward. And it's like amazing to see it when it happens. But you know, the unfortunate thing is that people will come after you. You know, there will be people to try to stop you, and that makes it even harder. And I wish that they
yeah.
wouldn't, but they do, you know,
They
for whatever
do.
reasons. Yeah. And that is a really hard thing, but
Well, it's also hard too to like accept that like once you get moving, that's when they really start coming after you. Like
yes,
when you're just going through the motions and you know, you can really kind of hide under everything, keep your head under and nobody notices. But man, when you start like sticking up for yourself, when you start taking action and progressing, people zero in on you so quick and that that really hurts because you just start to get making progress or you just work up the confidence to like fuck it, I'm not going to do this old shit anymore. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to try something new and then to immediately start getting resistance.
pushback. Yeah, not
Oh,
just pushback, but like people like who are like, I am gonna make it my life mission to
yeah.
oppose you.
Yes, yes. It's like
You're
holy
like,
shit.
wow, why?
Yeah.
Like you
Oh,
just barely noticed me over here, and now suddenly I'm like the your raison d'être.
yes, yes. Oh,
Yeah, that's a really hard one too. I mean, there is like a Mormon theology kind of thought there is that when that I'll give you since I'm giving you all the Mormon theologies
yeah, yeah.
is that the idea, you know, so like in the Mormon theology, in the pre-existence, right? There we all decided like, hey, how are we going to keep advancing as a species, right? Essentially was the idea and then there was one guy who was like, "We're gonna send them basically to a boarding school, you know, except I'm gonna be in charge." And there was another guy, Jesus, who was like, "No, send them to the boarding school and allow them to make their own mistakes and learn from their mistakes." And Jesus said, and I will like be crucified or whatever to like uh atone for these
Oh,
mistakes, these sins or
yeah.
whatever. Yeah. So then Lucifer is the one who pitched the first plan. He gets so angry. There's a war in heaven. Really, it's just a war of ideas. It's like a political war. But he ends up taking a third of the people end up following him, kind of like following Trump or something.
Yes, yes.
And he's like, we're just gonna like civil war this and we're just splitting off. Right. And so the Lucifer has always been like, I guess, invested in the failure of like the Jesus plan, right? And so
Yeah,
Lucifer and his one third of the host of heaven. So do the math on that. Like if
that's a
there's even
lot.
like, yeah, 8 billion people right
Oh my
now,
God.
yeah. So you're talking about like so yeah. So all these evil spirits, they're so kind of invested in just having the plan fail. And the idea is like the more that you are like on track, doing the right thing, the more that they're going to try to influence the people around you to attack you. Kind of like, in the Matrix, have you seen it?
Oh yeah.
How like is it Mr. Jones? Is that his name?
Um,
The bad guy?
yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, so he can invade, like, the bodies of other people if they're kinda weak-willed.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah. So that's kinda like Mormon theology too, is that, like, these evil spirits can the more weak-willed you are about something, the more these evil spirits can influence somebody to kind of attack you. They can influence, the way that people act. So the idea being that if they kinda see you, like, sticking your head up, and, like, making good change, then the naturally, they would start attacking you more because they don't want you to make good changes. And so if you are getting attacked, the Mormon kind of idea then is maybe you're doing right things.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're doing wrong things and
Yes.
you're getting it, that's why
Yeah.
you're failing or something. But yeah.
Well, and yeah, there's something to I've also been thinking a lot lately about like Copernicus, Galileo, these figures who
Oh
like I
yeah.
will step out and say what is true and everyone is against me and the hammer comes down and I mean they will suffer like huge consequences for that, but there are moments throughout time in history and in your life where like you will be brutally alone. You will be
Yes.
stepping out for what you believe is right, advocating, taking action, and you will not only get no support, you will get huge amounts of resistance and punishment for it. Uh but suffering through that and standing through that, I mean, I can't really speak to their lives in particular, but it does seem to be a quality that, like, the enlightenment, peace, freedom, even an ability to enjoy almost the most barest of life is unlocked for you when you have sacrificed everything for, doing what is right or being yourself.
Yes. So the Latin phrase I like for this is fiat justitia ruat Calum, a Latin legal phrase meaning "let justice be done, though the heavens fall." And the idea
Ah,
being like, nope, it's just process about this. It's like, no, I will speak up for truth. I will be Lionheart about this, no matter what. Though the heavens fall, this is what's
yes.
happening. Cheat me to my face. Here we go.
Yes.
Mhm.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Well, now I feel I'm sorry that you're going through this, but I'm so happy to hear like if you have this perspective on it already, then I feel like you are like 80% of the way through.
Well, thank you, thank you. I really that means a lot. Honestly,
Yeah.
I yeah, it's been a lot. It's been a lot of hell for a while, and all my own doing too.
Yes.
At least I can. Well, I can't laugh at the moment, but goddamn, later I can laugh at just the bullshit I get myself into. But
Yes. Well,
but
it's
yeah,
really hard because we don't learn from experience too. So it's like we have a lot of things
yeah.
working against us.
Well, that's what I was talking about. Earlier this year in the spring, for a couple months, I was actually in an outpatient crew, and very slowly, especially towards the end, I was trying to I never brought up well, yeah, I never brought up the word psychopath, but I was trying to express more of what would reveal that sort of aspect to me, um, in careful ways about it. And one of the issues I was talking to him about at the time and what I really struggled with in the months afterwards was, yeah, my God, it is amazing. Like, it's like a phenomenon to watch myself get into such a shitty situation and then feel it too, feel horrible about it. And then, man, an hour later, it just like, dude, that never happened.
Yeah.
Um, I mean,
Compartmentalized.
yeah. And it's like kind of not even within my control. I mean, I would be amazed when I'd wake up some nights after a long night of partying and the amount of drinking, the drug use, the amount of money spent, the things I said to people, the things I did, just a mess. And it would hurt so bad for an hour. And then after that hour, I'd be like, hey, let's try again.
Yeah.
Let's hit the club, let's go to the casino, let's do this or that, and it's just like, oh my God, what am I fucking doing right now? But yeah, yeah, I really am though. Like I'm deeply grateful in a way that I don't think I could ever express for you and for your work and all that you've done, and for the fact that you took the journey you did, the book you wrote, the like podcast, like all of it has been like so incredibly helpful and validating. I mean, when I read your book, like it literally felt like I finally could like it's like it was so odd. Like I remember just reading it and it just felt like part of me actually came alive. Like there was a part of me that was being validated. Some I saw in someone else my thinking, my experience, my being in a way I never had from anything else. And yeah, so I am just really grateful though for all the work you've done because I don't imagine I would be here without it. And I definitely would still be toiling in a way that I'm grateful that I've pushed through, even though I do still have a good amount of work to be done.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you too coming on and kind of sharing your insights because, I just have my one anecdotal experience and I think it just helps other people to hear the more perspectives, the better. And your experience is different than mine and other people are going to be able to relate to your experience better than mine. And so I just really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk to me about these things. It's very very brave, very vulnerable and, very admirable. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm always really happy to talk to you.
With that, should we end?
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like a nice a nice little ending.
Nice little ending. Well, let's
Can we get
definitely
any
send me those
Lifetime
things.
music to start playing? Uh
Da-da-da, yeah.
yeah.
And then welcome, and thank you for joining us on our
Yes.
podcast. Yeah. So definitely send me that stuff about the tricksters, and hopefully we'll get you on after I get a chance to kind of review that material. I would love that.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
All right, sounds good. And thanks again for watching Tar twice at my
Yes,
request
yes.
and getting on here to talk about it. I feel like I've unburdened myself about some of my thoughts and I had like some insights talking to you that I hadn't even had before about her chaos cycle and her, mutilating herself and some of these other things. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, yes, that's awesome. I'm glad you had that.
Yeah. All right, I'll chat you later.
Okay, sounds good. See ya.